Please welcome Matthias Stoffner with Henry Blodget.
So let me introduce to all of you Matthias Stoffner, who is the CEO of Axel Springer, who is the parent of Business Insider. Axel Springer is the leading digital publisher in Europe, but let me just give you some background because I didn't know that before they bought us. I crammed before we had the initial discussions and learned this. But just background, Matthias became CEO about 15 years ago. He's transformed what was once the strongest newspaper publishing company in Europe into a digital company, now the leading digital publisher in Europe, and we are one of their expansion plans in the United States. Before that, Matthias was a journalist and continues to write on very provocative topics. Has also, over the years, been very vocal about just what Scott Galloway was talking about, which is the immense power of Google and Facebook. It's very vocal in basically suggesting that Google should be broken up several years ago in the EU, where they're being more aggressive than the United States regulators. So huge pleasure to have my boss, Matthias, here. And let's start with the duopoly and what Scott just said. Do you agree? Should these companies be broken up?
Yeah, Scott took my job. That's very clear. No, it was a brilliant presentation. I think probably in the end he's going to be right, and I would think that the likelihood that sooner or later it's going to happen is pretty high. Nevertheless, I have at the moment a slightly more optimistic notion, perhaps also in the spirit that there should be always a kind of benefit of doubt, or there should be always be a kind of last chance. And I think the debate that we are having at the moment about Google's abuse of market domination and about Facebook's role in the context of fake news is in a way a tremendously healing debate with a lot of very positive effects and opportunities. And we see that both Google and Facebook have reacted very concretely on the debates and the basically requests that we have addressed for years by now preparing subscription tools. And I mean, we haven't seen the final product. We have seen prototypes. We have been involved in some development phases, and it looks promising. If the end product is what it is supposed to be, a real tool that with basically one click enables users of Facebook and Google to enter a subscription world of publishers, then I think they would, in a way, at least in their interaction with publishers, transform from potential monopolies, publishing monopolies, into distribution partners, because they would facilitate that process. They would basically endorse and facilitate paid content and subscription, which I think would be a game changer and would provide many answers on all the current debates we have around fake news. That is the optimistic notion, but the proof is in the pudding, and the devil is in the details, so we have to wait. We have to see the product. If it's really convincing, if we have access to the data, if we own the customer relationship, then I think we should be really happy, and we should give it a chance and give it a try. If not, we have to get back to Scott's scenario.
Okay. And it seems clear that over the last couple of years, at least Facebook and Google in particular are talking a better game, as though they understand the importance of journalism, and they are talking a little bit less loudly about what Scott referred to, which is we must give everybody a voice. We must take the completely non-fact-based conspiracy theorists and put them on an equal level with these journalism organizations that at least try to hold themselves to a very high standard of attack. That is fairness, that is democracy. We are just platforms, we have no responsibility. They seem to be actually taking more steps towards saying, we are being used as propaganda tools. We actually want to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Do you see that? Are you optimistic about that?
I see Google and Facebook as poor victims. I have difficulties with that. I'm not so sure. And I think that has been explained very eloquently why they are not. But I mean, let's look at Facebook. They have the best possible business model to monetize content. Zero content creation costs, but in the last quarter of last year, 99% of advertising growth, digital advertising growth in the United States was to the benefit of Google and Facebook. So I think if you have basically all the upside of monetization through advertising and zero investment in content creation, that's a business model that cannot be sustainable. I mean, I just cannot see how that is going to survive. And we have now this unique opportunity. We have that fake news phenomenon. We have seen how it has manipulated elections, how it has manipulated debates, how it has misled populations from Great Britain to America and has led to dysfunctional governments. I mean, what else do we need? I think it's a tremendous campaign to show and illustrate why trustful brands, why quality content, why journalists who at least try to find the truth, they make mistakes, but if they do, they apologize, why that system is essential for democracy. And now if we find the technical tools to really establish subscription business models, I think that would be really a good future scenario. If not, I think the necessity to change something in that system is obvious. So honestly, I'm more optimistic, much more optimistic today than I used to be, let's say, 5 or 3 years ago.
And what do you say to those who say, look, Facebook and Google have a point, which is they are simply letting individuals choose what they value. They're not trying to be judgmental. They're not trying to say that your publications are better for society than the conspiracy website or whatever it happens to be, the latest fake meme. People should be able to judge that. They should not be in the business of doing that. Do they have a point?
They absolutely have a point. And by the way, I completely share that. I think if we would basically push them to take responsibility, we would really transform them into true publishers. Because if they start to curate, I mean, they are doing it already today. The algorithm curates. And we cannot deny that. So, but if they would even go a step further, forced by politicians with good intentions to say, well, actually, Facebook has to do fact-checking for all the stories that are posted on Facebook. First of all, it's totally unrealistic. This is not going to work. And more importantly, I really don't want that. A publisher with more than 2 billion clients, a world monopoly who decides what is good news and bad news, fake news and true news, and who should get which information, that's a terrible scenario. I think we really should not have that. We should reduce their role. They should really stick to Mark Zuckerberg's statement, we are a technology company, we connect people. If they do that, if they stick to that, I think it's fine. At the moment, they're somewhere in the middle. They're moving step by step into the role of a publisher, and we have to make sure that governments with good intentions are not achieving exactly the opposite by forcing them to really take that responsibility and curate. That would be the end. And then they definitely have to be disrupted.
One thing that a lot of publishers and producers are so frustrated with Facebook and Google about in particular is that every year, every quarter, their revenues and profits grow. They hire thousands more people. They're so successful. Meanwhile, so many publishers and producers are having to cut to please shareholders and stay in business because of the pressure. Do you believe that it is Facebook and Google's responsibility to find a way for traditional publishers to survive? No, I mean, they are entrepreneurs, and their, let's say, their role is to maximize their position, to maximize their value, their growth, their profits. I don't blame them for that. For that, I think it's really, it's up to us, to the society, to journalists, to create that critical balance and to make sure that they are operating in a fair and healthy and competitive environment. If they're abusing their market dominating position, that's wrong. The thing why I am optimistic is that out of their own entrepreneurial egoism, they learn that it is in their very interest to help publishers to monetize their content. Because if they think that they can continue with just stealing or taking or using other people's content and monetizing it almost exclusively, that is a kind of a pirate business model that is not going to be sustainable in the long run. If they understand that they have with this market power a substantial role in society and that they only can play that role if they attract good content, truthful content, and if they distribute it, because everything else is going to destroy also their credibility. We have seen it in the example of eBay, when eBay started to deal with all the fake brands, with the fake Gucci bags. And then customers complained, and then eBay said, well,
We have nothing to do with it. We are a platform. Exactly the same point. In the end, it was the image problem of eBay. And the fake news debate is now becoming the image problem of Facebook. And if 43% of the people are saying if they read news on Facebook, Facebook is the source of the news, then they go home with this fake news image. And that's bad for them. So in their very own entrepreneurial, egoistic interest, they have to make sure that producers of great quality content have a business model if they use Facebook.
And one of the things that I know both companies are concerned about is appearing in making judgments, even algorithmic judgments about which news organizations are credible and which are not, that they will inflame half of the population or some big percentage of the population who doesn't care as long as whatever is said is helping their particular team. And this is the way media has evolved. We had the President of the United States spend much of yesterday continuing his crusade against what he describes as fake news, fake media. Yeah. He clearly has a couple of media outlets that he regards as not fake, truth or what have you.
But isn't that a wonderful PR campaign for good journalism? I mean, sometimes you need the right enemies. In that case, we have.
I guess. What I would say is, with this view that you have of the United States from the outside, and obviously being a huge producer of media yourself, first of all, how is the United States media ecosystem doing covering a president who is articulating these things? And I'll say one more thing, who the supporters of the president, the White House yesterday came out and said, it is totally fine that the president of the United States is retweeting fake Muslim bashing videos because the threat is real.
No, of course it is not. It is not totally fine, and I think it is. I mean, unfortunately, it's a serious topic. If the president of the biggest democracy in the world is publicly accusing media and particular brands and making his own judgments, what is good and what is bad, I mean, it's a democracy scandal. It shows disrespect for a very important pillar of a democracy and of a free society. And that is a scandal, nothing else than a scandal. But in a way, people get used to scandals on even higher levels. And of course, he gets away with things where no other president or politician would ever have been able to get away with. Now, to judge how US media are doing, honestly, for a little European publisher, it's a bit hypocritical to pretend that I can really judge that. I don't know. I think overall US media are doing a good job. What I think is always essential, if you have populists, if you have autocrats, if you have people disrespectful for the instruments of democracy and for the instruments also of free media, it is even more important for good journalists to stay calm and cool. Don't answer propaganda with counter-propaganda. The more outrageous people are, the cooler you should be, the fairer you should be. So I think fairness is extremely important. And sometimes, and that is a globally widespread phenomenon, I think sometimes media brands have helped Donald Trump by just portraying him as a kind of clownish idiot and just ignoring the normal rules of fairness. There are good reasons to do that, and we have just addressed one example why you should and could be really upset. But I think for journalists, you always have to keep that standard of fairness, of listening to opposing views. Audiatur et altera pars, that's an old rule of good journalism. So in that spirit, we should just stick to our standards.
And as you see what's happening, not just in the United States, but the rise of, no other way to call it, nationalism, white supremacy, starting to see this in Europe as well. Knowing what you know about history, Germany's history in particular, what do you think? As you look forward, are you optimistic that this is just a...
Oh, definitely. First of all, I believe strongly in the free will of the people of the United States, and the people of the United States will be definitely stronger than a slightly dysfunctional government. I'm not worried about it in the long run.
And worldwide, not just the United States?
Well, worldwide we see that rise of populists and autocrats, ranging from Russia to Turkey, from to a certain degree, England, even to certain right-wing movements in Germany. You have it all around the world. And I think that has to do with the fact that people feel, you see, answers are getting more and more complex, simple truths are not available, but people are desperately looking for simple truth. And people who are providing, in this globalized world, in this completely accelerated reality, where everything is going faster and faster and there's more to digest every day, people are looking for simple answers. And if some people are providing very easy conspiracy theories, these guys are guilty, it's his fault or her fault. If it's that simple, then people tend to believe it. And that's the trend that we are facing as a global trend. A lot of politicians are also very much in that framework of a political correct speech that has no spirit, no soul, no juice, no nothing, that is just dry and doesn't really address people and their emotions. And the combination of these factors, a kind of slightly isolated and very often politically too correct political elite, and on the other hand, these, let's say, populists and autocrats who provide simple answers and conspiracy theories, that leads to the situation that we have. But I think that is great news for journalists. The role of journalism is getting bigger and more important every day. And we should just shape it. We should shape it in the digital world. We should create new brands. We should create brands with high credibility, with very faithful, loyal readers and customers. And then I'm not worried about it. The pendulum is always swinging. At the moment, it's swinging, unfortunately, into a very unpleasant direction. I'm pretty sure that with good journalism, it's going to swing back.
And part of what makes great journalism, obviously, is news reporting, fact-based, that persuades some people. One thing that has made President Trump so compelling, that got him elected, is he is just a tremendously persuasive and charismatic personality to a certain percentage of voters, obviously. In the United States, the Democrats have not had as charismatic a person since the last president. As journalists, what do you think on the op-ed and opinion side, what is persuasive in this? Megyn Kelly said yesterday in her fantastic interview, if you didn't see that, I would urge you all to see that, when Allison asked her, why did you drop political journalism? You were so good at it. She said, look, after being a political journalist covering the Trump phenomenon for almost a year and speaking directly to the people, what I decided ultimately was that no facts would ever persuade Trump's supporters. I might as well go to the edge of the Pacific Ocean and yell out into the Pacific for all the good it was doing. I would rather go do something that I can actually create some help. So what do you say to all the journalists who are allowed to be opinion columnists and op-eds? Some people just get mad. That doesn't work, even though so many of the things that are being said are fundamentally enraging to so many people. How do you persuade that segment of the population that has gotten us where we are, that in fact democracy and free press are better for everybody?
Sorry, but I think the phenomenon that you have just described is obvious. That for a certain group of people, facts don't count and don't make a difference. Does that mean that we journalists should resign, that we should give up? No, I think that's absolutely wrong. I mean, Churchill once said failure is not an option. Failure is not an option in that context. We may not give up. And we should not be too negative about it. I mean, look to the subscription figures of the New York Times. Highest subscription figures in their history. The highest growth of digital subscription. Why? Because there's also a need for trustful sources. And the New York Times is not the only example. I think it is globally also a kind of counter trend to fight that kind of ridiculous populism and trend of simplification. Just dare to be complex. Reality is complex, and we cannot come up with easy answers, or we cannot just resign. We have to constantly persuade people with facts, but not only facts, also with passionate reporting and with lively language and with great storytelling. You are doing that with Business Insider, and your figures are growing. Why is there any reason for skepticism about the role of journalism? I don't see that. Just because there's a little accident in government building, we should not give up our jobs.
Speaking of our jobs, are you concerned that bots are going to replace journalists? We've seen stories where automatically written stories are pretty good, and lots of news organizations are now using them to tell stories. Should we all?
Well, Henry, let me give you first an example why I strongly believe in artificial intelligence, and I'm thinking I'm very optimistic that they are going to find the right answers. There was a kind of young tech company that has developed a very sophisticated bot, and the developer was very proud and wanted to present it to the CEO. And so the CEO wanted to test the new product a little bit before it's really launched. So he said, let me ask some questions. So what is my brother doing at this moment? So the bot immediately answered, your brother is sitting on an American airline flight from New York to Beijing, AA 574. Okay, that's true, very impressive. So let me ask you a more complicated question. What is my father actually doing at this moment? The bot immediately says, your father is sitting at the Rockaway Beach and is fishing. So the CEO says, I got you, that's wrong. My father passed away many years. The bot says, sorry, that's the husband of your mother. Your father is sitting at the Rockaway Beach and fishing. So the bot is always smarter. You know that we are using already bots to write stories about soccer. The second league and the third league reporting is all done by bots because we couldn't afford to have real reporters for that. And with that, we are saving money that we can invest in real investigative reporting. So I think bot journalism can be very beneficial, can be very good for the quality of journalism. And of course, I'm aware of the threats. They are obvious. The implications on the labor market, is it good or bad in the long run? Open question. This really serious question is, in the end, the singularity theory and the fact that artificial intelligence is taking over human intelligence. I mean, I was just talking to an expert on that, and he said there's no question that this is going to happen. But I mean, don't worry, you will be treated like animals in the zoo, but you will be well fed and will be all nice. Yeah. So the relevant things will be decided by other forces. Okay, that's a scenario. We have to make sure that in the long run, machines are serving the people and not the other way around. But I think if I draw a line, I think the opportunities of AI are much, much bigger. And I have to admit that I'm under the impression of a visit that I made. I was visiting the company Magic Leap in Florida. I don't know if, I mean, you have heard about it. Business Insider reported on it in a slightly skeptical tone, by the way. What I've seen here is really mind-blowing. I think that is going to be the next game changer. It is really providing a mixed reality with options to do things in parallel, to see things in parallel, to consume things in parallel, and to do that all with a very inclusive experience. Yeah. Virtual reality as we know it is very exclusive. You sit there with your glass, and if you want to watch a soccer match with your friend, you can barely talk because everybody is sitting there with this glass. With this tool, it's a totally different, it's a different experience. It's very collective, it's very communicative, and it's just mind-blowing. I think it has the potential to replace a lot of devices that we use today. We will see. I mean, it's a long way to go, but I find that tremendously exciting.
With Magic Leap, do you have to wear a big backpack filled with batteries and ugly glasses?
I signed an NDA, so I cannot give you any details about the product as such, but I tell you, you will be amazed how simple it is.
Okay. Matthias, so great to have you. Thanks very much, everybody.
Please welcome Jeff Zucker with Mike Shields.
Morning. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thank you.
Had any trouble getting here?
Yeah, we took the elevator up.
All right, good. Thanks for coming. So I thought I knew what we were going to start talking about, and then yesterday there was a lot of stuff in the news, and it would be impossible not to ask you a little bit about what happened with what did you know about Matt Lauer, and how are you reconciling that with what's going on in the rest of the industry?
Yeah. So look, obviously, it's incredibly disturbing what we've learned in the last 24 hours from the reporting from the New York Times and Variety, and incredibly sad. First of all, you have to feel for the women who endured this and lived with it and have come forward. Obviously, I've known Matt for 25 years, and I didn't know this Matt. And
you didn't see this coming. You didn't.
No, look, I mean, what's chronicled incredibly well in Variety and the New York Times is, deviant and predatory behavior. And, obviously, that is not something that I was ever aware of or had even heard of or had ever been suggested or anything like that. And it's just incredibly heartbreaking.
When you were there at the Today Show, was it like it's been depicted as a real boys club, raucous kind of place? Is that a fair characterization? And
yeah, so I've been gone from the Today Show for 17 years, right? So I was at the Today Show. I was executive producer of the Today Show from 1992 to 2000, and that's not the way that I would have characterized the show at all at the time. And obviously, in that time that I was there, I was at NBC for 25 years. For 25 years of my career, no one ever brought to me or to my knowledge, there was never a complaint about Matt. There was never a suggestion of that kind of deviant, predatory behavior, not even a whisper of it, nothing like that. So, I can't say that that's the culture that we lived in.
Right. What about, we'll definitely shift topics in a second here. What about at CNN right now? I imagine every company in the country, but every media company is reconciling with this, right? Or trying to figure out, do we have a problem? What's going on? I know that that's Jake Tapper's show. There was an announcement yesterday. What's been going on at CNN amidst all this?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, I think, and I don't think it's just the media world either, right? Obviously, but clearly the media world is not immune. We had a senior producer on one of our programs in Washington, State of the Union, where there was a behavior that was completely inconsistent with our standards and culture, and we dismissed him last week. And look, like the way that NBC was when I was there, the way CNN is today, if we are aware of if any of that is brought to our attention, we'll investigate immediately, and that's what we did last week. And I think that, I'm sure that's what's going on everywhere.
Shifting gears a little bit, I want to ask you about another topic that I don't know how much you can say about, but in a year from now, are you going to be working for AT&T? Are you going to be working for somebody else? What?
Well, first of all, that's out of our control. I assume that we'll be working for AT&T, but certainly that will be determined by others.
Did they tell you much?
No, listen, at CNN, even though we're part of the stories in this, we are, it's not something that impacts or affects us at all. It's, we're doing our jobs, and we work for Time Warner now, and if we work for AT&T, so be it. But we come in and we do our jobs every day. Who we're working for is not something that we spend, frankly, any time thinking about. Anytime.
All right, let's get into what's going on with CNN and your business. I want to read you, this is from a prominent media critic, a quote. Fox News.
Do we have a name? Do we have a name?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
Fox News is much more important in the United States than CNN, But outside of the US, CNN International is still a major source of, parentheses, fake news, and they represent our nation to the world very poorly. The outside world does not see the truth from them, exclamation point.
He is a terrible media critic.
How do you guys get bigger in the US?
Well, I mean, we're enormous in the U.S. if that's the question. Listen, in terms of our performance in the U.S., CNN's been around for 37 years. This is the most watched year in the history of CNN on television. In terms of digital, we're the #1 most consumed news and information digital platform in the United States. There aren't global rankings, but we'd be at the top if there were global rankings as well. So more people touch us through our digital and television than any other news organization there is.
I want to ask you what this last year has been like. Let's go back.
Do you want to tell everybody in case they don't know who said that?
That was President Trump.
Right.
There's a lot of them actually. I could take up.
Right. Well, so he tweeted that over the weekend.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We don't have time to go through all of those. I'd love to. I imagine, was there a meeting, let's say a year and change ago at CNN saying, this election's been crazy, it's been great for business, but we got to prepare. Hillary's presidency is going to be kind of dull. We got to expect some ratings to come down. We're going to find something else to cover. Were those kind of conversations happening?
Well, I mean, I think that certainly, we've evolved the CNN business over the last few years, where we did not expect this kind of news bump, news interest. I don't think any news organization did, whether it's the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, CBS, NBC. And so, we've been evolving our business, which is why we've invested so heavily in digital and moved so strongly to that. It's why we've invested heavily in original series and documentaries and films, shows like Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, and Lisa Ling's This Is Life, and the Decade series of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and Race for the White House, and things like that. And so we've been evolving the business in anticipation of, continuing lessening of audience and things like that. So we felt we were preparing for a different world, but that evolution has been taking place over the last 5 years. We could never have anticipated the audience levels that we're seeing now and the interest in both our television and digital properties. Look, the one thing that I'm incredibly proud of beyond the audience levels for television and digital is the journalism that we've been doing, and that's really what drives us. The one thing I know for sure between the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN, the one thing that I know for sure is that Donald Trump has made American journalism great again. What about that?
It's got to be incredibly exhilarating to cover this White House, but there's got to be intense pressure, and you guys, everybody wants to break these crazy huge stories. You guys ran into some trouble pushing a particular story about this White House. What was that like, and what has this year been like?
Well, I think you're referring to we made a mistake on a story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, we've had an incredible year, and our journalism has been at the forefront. We did make one mistake on a story, and when we made it, we acknowledged it. That really has not had any impact on our organization at all, and not something, other than to acknowledge the mistake and make sure that it doesn't happen again. We've, broken an incredible number of stories this year on holding Washington's feet to the fire and holding the administration accountable and investigating what happened during the election. I am incredibly proud of the work that we've done. So, yes, it's intense, it's exhilarating, it's exhausting, it's never ending. You never know what the next day is going to bring. But I'm incredibly proud of where we are, and this is, I think, the high point of CNN's 37 years.
Let's talk about what you guys are doing with your digital business, because you're investing in original IP. You're building up your digital talent. You're also there's talk about doing some kind of paid experience, right?
We're certainly looking at that. We are, yes.
How do you? how do you take what has been a largely free product for
Right.
the most part for a couple of decades now and make it special enough in this current climate to make it worth paying?
Yeah, well, I think what you're going to see over the next year, without any timetable on it, is we'll experiment with some different things. We're not going to move to a pay wall per se or anything like that. Can we have certain elements of it that are subscription and unique offerings that wouldn't necessarily be part of what we do today? I think that we're going to experiment with that just as we continue to grow out that digital business.
Let's talk about Great Big Story, which is your,
Yep.
I guess when it started, it was a born on social brand, or really like a distributed media brand, and now it's evolving.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most exciting things that's going on at CNN that hasn't gotten much attention. It's a brand that was born 2 years ago, so it's only been around for 2 years. It carries
deliberately not CNN, right?
It carries no CNN branding. It's called Great Big Story. And we didn't want to saddle it with the legacy implications that come with CNN. People think when they see CNN, they think breaking news, they think news, breaking news, et cetera. That's not what we wanted a Great Big Story to be with. So it's the only business that we've ever launched in 37 years that doesn't carry the CNN branding. What it is basically 2.5-minute stories, 2.5-minute video.
Short-form stuff.
Short-form video storytelling that, frankly, reaches an audience that we don't reach in either CNN US television or the rest of digital. The average age of the consumer is 27 years old, male, global. It's really the bullseye for what advertisers always say they want to reach. And we've had tremendous success with it. It's exploded in 2 years as a startup, and it's probably one of our biggest growth engines over the next 5 years within the entire company.
And I believe you want to go from just being distributed on social media to eventually to build an OTT network, right?
Right. So
why go there?
Why go there?
Yeah, what makes you think that's the right way to take that?
Yes, well, I mean, so one of the things that we're looking at over probably the next couple of years is whether or not there's an opportunity to expand this into a full-fledged OTT offering. I think part of it is we've had such success with it. There's been such demand for that kind of short-form video. We think there's an opportunity in the marketplace. Everybody is out there trying to do video, and all of these new startups are figuring out that it's not so easy. It's what we do.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the reasons that we've had success with it is because it's in our DNA. And this has been the big story over the last few years. Everybody wants to move into short form video, and they found out, you know what, it's not so easy. For us, it's actually what we do, and we've had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of all of a sudden there's a moment where you've got Mashable selling for much lower than it thought. BuzzFeed's letting people, Vice is having trouble.
Right. So, yeah, so
it's coming.
Yeah, look, I think that is what's going on right now across the industry. It turns out it's not so easy. It turns out that people pivoted, a year or two ago to video because their initial thing wasn't working, right? And so that's the first sign that you're having trouble is, okay, well, we're going to leave that behind. We're going to pivot to video. Now the next sign is, well, that didn't work, and now we're going to sell for a lot less, or we're not going to be able to make it. I think that what we've been able to do is, because of the infrastructure that's already in place at CNN, because of the fact that we're in the video business, we've been able to launch this new business successfully. And I think that with others falling by the wayside, our run rate and opportunity over the next 5 years is very strong.
Do you think that's interesting though? Do you think let's say your digital operations or Great Big Story or both were not part of this company?
No, I think
could they live on their own?
Yeah, look, I think that it's a fair point to say that we enjoy the advantage of the overall infrastructure. If we were just a pure startup without that, I don't think it would be as easy. And I think that's what these other companies are experiencing. And I think that everybody goes to the shiny object because, they've got the secret sauce. And everybody talks about all these new companies that you just mentioned. And then, here we are 5 years later, and it's not quite as special. And nobody wants to talk about the digital success of CNN or the audience levels at CNN Digital. CNN Digital dwarfs every other news and information site there is. No one's even close. even among millennials. And yet, it's because it's part of that old CNN that nobody wants to acknowledge that. CNN Digital is incredibly strong, incredibly profitable, incredibly successful, and maybe it's time to take another look at what wasn't the bright, shiny object. Speaking
of millennials, and I know we're running out of time quickly here, you know the TV business really well. That is under fire. There's an increasing amount of pressure because millennials and younger generations don't want to watch live television. They're binging, they're streaming, they're cutting the cord. How does that affect? Where do you see things going? Like, do you see a big future for CNN and skinny bundles? Is OTT going to be a whole different?
So listen, we're not chasing millennials per se in the CNN US television audience. That's not who's going to watch us. The fact is, the average age of our audience at CNN US is 59 years old. Now that sounds old only when you then compare it to the rest of the news channels whose average age is 65, right?
Right.
And there's a huge difference between 59 and 65. So if we go chasing millennials to watch CNN, we're going to fail. That's not going to work. That's why we have digital, where the average age of our audience there is 47. That's why we have Great Big Story, where the average age of our audience is 27, right? So they all complement each other. But now we do know that when news breaks and when people want to really dig in when something is happening, millennials do come to CNN.
Yeah.
They know that that's the place to go. But they're not going to watch us on a regular basis and an ongoing thing. And if we chase them, then we're going to chase away what is our core audience. And so we're just not going to do that.
So what happens to, you ran programming on NBC for a long time, or CNN. What happens to the broader TV ad ecosystem, industrial complex?
Yeah, so look, I would not want to be in broadcast ad-supported television over the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's obviously a very difficult proposition.
What would you do? We had Bob Greenblatt here yesterday. He was talking about how This Is Us is a huge hit, but if you count how many people watch it over like 3-6 months and you add all that up, but the business doesn't really work that way.
The business isn't set up for that.
So
right?
What should they do?
Well, look, I think that in the broadcast space, I think there's going to be much more of a move to live events, whether that's news, sports, and event kind of programming, and they'll have a couple of big hits like This Is Us or one or two others, but it's really going to be an event-driven business between sports and news and award shows and events like that, and I think that's where that business is going.
All right, time has flown by here. Thanks, Jeff, for having a great discussion, but we could talk all day, but we got to keep going.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
Please welcome Ann Finucane with Michael Kasson.
Thank you and good afternoon, or good morning. Inc. magazine recently published an article that said in the banking industry, they cited a Gallup poll that said 1 in 4 Americans trust their bank. Clearly, 3 in 4 Americans at that time did not know Ann Finucane. It's true. Listed by Forbes and Fortune as one of the most powerful women and named one of the 10 most powerful women in banking, Ann is a true force. As I see it, she is one of the most powerful and trusted people in banking and business, period, and I'm honored to say a good friend and a partner. In an era of tremendous disruption for the financial industry, Ann has put her laser focus on creating positive relationships between the bank and its many customers. She passed the CMO torch recently to Meredith Verdone so that she could spend more time deploying the bank's capital to deliver and develop new types of businesses such as underwriting green bonds and the company's broader catalytic finance initiative. Recently, and over a period of time, the bank invested $1 billion toward the goal of stimulating at least $10 billion in new investment in clean energy projects. She has proven without a doubt that a company can, as they should, do well and at the same time do good. So with that, it's a pleasure to welcome Ann Finucane to the stage today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Ann, you're a self-proclaimed hippie. I think that's a great way to describe you as we've developed a friendship and a wonderful, close working relationship. You majored in literature and art history in college. How did you make the transition from literature and art history to the role as vice chairman of one of the most important financial institutions in the world? Just curious what that journey was like.
Slow. But I have great gratitude to Ken Burns and Lynn Novak for the Vietnam series on PBS. I recommend it to everyone, and in full disclosure, we underwrote it. So, but I think it explains people of a certain age, my age, your age. I think it would be hard either. I mean, most of us were probably some form of a hippie, in so much as our social lives were dedicated, many of us, not all of us, to protesting the war, supporting our troops, but protesting the war. And we were disaggregated. I mean, we were the ultimate disaggregated generation, in so much as I, started high school as LBJ said he wouldn't run for a second term, and I concluded, or I was in college, didn't conclude college, when Nixon resigned. And that was the coming of age period for me. So I don't think that I would even have had some sense of what business was. It just was not there. I mean, it wasn't in the public dialogue because so much else was. And once I got to work and started working, I realized I really liked business. Now, I began in government, then broadcasting, then advertising, and got to banking sort of in an odd way. I was the chief marketing officer. I thought I'd try this gig briefly, and discovered it was the land of mergers and acquisitions, which means a lot of tumult, a lot of crisis, a lot of gaining the trust of various constituencies. That's what I felt I know how to do, so that's how I got into banking.
So, and as you are in the position you're in now, I'm certain a lot of resumes come across your desk.
Yeah.
At some level in the organization and throughout your experience. What do you look for? Do you look for somebody that's come from banking? Do you look at somebody who's got that financial services background? Or do you look at somebody who had maybe art history and literature? Because it's interesting, you in many industries, we've seen where somebody from the outside comes in and they generally are rejected as a foreign object. And the learning curve is tough and the acceptance is tough and all of that. What do you look for in the people you're bringing aboard?
Well, first of all, I think it's hard for anybody to join anything, even if it's into a marriage, when you're a single person, joining a tribe of any sort. So that's the first sort of element is that's difficult no matter what. But I look for, obviously I look for core competency. Generally, you're looking for a specific job. And then beyond that, curiosity, your ability to work, the same thing we got in grade school. How well do you work with others? I didn't realize how important that would be as an adult, but that's really important.
I build criteria now. I say the people that I would choose to deal with have to tick 3 boxes. They have to have integrity. That's table stakes. Yeah. I'm snobbish enough to say they should have intellect. And the third thing, and I think maybe metaphorically one of the most important, is are they fun on a bus?
Yeah.
Are they going to be people that you can...
Yeah, are they willing to be on the bus first?
Are they willing to be on the bus with others, A, and B, will they be fun on that bus?
Yeah, there's so many great individual contributors, but when you're trying to build a team, that doesn't work out so well. Whether it's a sports team or a team at a bank or anywhere else. So.
And you experienced, at least in our generation, we certainly knew from our parents about the other recession, or depression, but you experienced 2008 in a senior position at a financial institution that went through extraordinarily difficult times.
Right.
And you're on the other side of that now, and yet it's not far behind us, and you always have to be mindful. Can you talk a bit about, and please riff on this, how you maintained equilibrium, how you kept that focus at a time when the nadir, the trust, was gone. Everybody thought their banks were, and by the way, it's a compound question. It's no different than the impact that we're having in the industry today, in the advertising, marketing, and media industry, with the breakdown of trust and the need for transparency and these things that are going down the lane here between clients and agencies. You've been on both sides of that. You began your career as in an advertising agency. So if you could talk about how those things, how you weathered it, and kind of make the analogy to what's happening today in the advertising and marketing industry.
Well, just to make the analogy, I think the thing is that when you're in trouble, you got to call it for what it is. So I find that almost in any crisis, there's always that element of people that want to put rose-colored glasses or think it isn't that bad, or, hey, maybe no one else noticed. They all notice. And maybe no one else is talking about it. They are talking about it. So I think the first thing is recognize your reality. Second thing is what's your game plan. And then the third thing is realize it's going to take a while. And despite the fact that it's going to take a while, you still have to go at it every day, which can be innovating. So you have to find a way to make it interesting. You know what I think about this, which is what made it interesting for me in the banking crisis is to learn something new every day, even if it was something bad. Master what the issues were. So there were all these arcane vehicles in finance that you had not heard about before. You probably wouldn't hear about again. CDO squared. These products that were fairly toxic and complicated. But to learn about them and to recognize, okay, what is the essence of this, and how would we not ever do that again? Two, I do think it mattered, particularly in the financial services industry, less in the advertising agency business, that there were too many older white men at the top and not enough diversity. And that has largely changed, and it's really made a difference. And it's made a difference in one simple way. When you're around a table with people that you have not hung with for 20 years, and you have different opinions, and you came from different places, you tend to ask questions. So if something comes up and you're not sure of it, you say, wait a minute, could we go back here for a minute? And I think that that is a formula that really helps. For our own company, we also had the advantage of a new CEO came in, Brian Moynihan, who I had worked with for years. He recognized our reality. He called it for what it is. We rebuilt the company, which is not to say we never have a problem, but it has transparency.
But you rebuilt the company.
Right. I believe that in the agency business, to recognize that the problem is real, to become more transparent. And the agency business, to me, is a little like the banking business in so much as while you're going through your own issue, the world is changing at such a rapid pace that you also have to be thinking about that. So for us, we go into the financial crisis with fairly traditional media. I mean, you had Facebook, you didn't have Twitter, you didn't have Snapchat, and YouTube was sort of a nascent thing. By the time you're 2 years in, they are all at full rev, and you're going to deal with that too. That's what I think, for me, advertising agencies that for so long had a certain hierarchy and a certain way of making money, it's all changed. And you've got to deal with that even as you deal with a controversy. And those that can do that multitasking win.
That's a great way to look at it, because the ability to walk and chew gum is a requirement of business today. And I want to come back to the diversity, because it's obviously, as we just heard in the previous conversation with Mike and Jeff, I'm not in a conversation now in our world covering all the different industries that we look at, where this issue of diversity, but this issue of Me Too, this issue of the obvious challenge that so many companies and so many individuals are facing, and how, again, it's not unique to the entertainment industry. It seems that it's more prevalent, but it's not unique to the entertainment industry. I think every industry's got the issues. How are you dealing with that in an area where you've always been involved in empowerment and in diversity and in gender equality, and obviously you yourself being such a wonderful example of that in the boardroom? How's it impacting the day job at the Bank of America I mean, and I'll posit this. I have friends of mine, which I think is a ridiculous answer. I have friends of mine in the entertainment business who say, I won't have a meeting now. I'm not saying this, I've heard this, with a woman with the door closed. And my answer to that is, that's bullshit. Just act appropriately, and you can close the door, open the door, you can do whatever you want. It's not, as long as you're not doing things that are inappropriate. How do we avoid that unconscious bias making its way in, which we've been fighting so hard to get away from? Kind of a compound question, but.
Yeah, so gender equality and predators are two different things.
Clear.
So on gender equality, I think that we are getting there. We're not quite there yet, but we're certainly getting there. In our own company, 40% of the most senior management team, the executive management team are women. The board is 30% women. And once you get that kind of torque behind something, you're going to get momentum. The second thing is you have to have a culture that is intolerant of this kind of behavior. But we're talking about individuals who are predators, not individuals that misbehave badly or are, you know.
Big difference.
And I think that it's been very difficult for the women that have come forward, and to shine a light on this is a brave thing. I mean, the thing is, what we hope for all the young women that come along that we hire, mentor, or our children, or that are in this audience, that you don't deal with what some women before you dealt with, because it's just wrong, and it's and sometimes criminal, but it's certainly wrong, and I think it has been underreported for years. So I'm good with this. This is a moment in time, and I think we should seize the opportunity to bring it out in the open. And it would be great if women could come to work and not think, I got to think about all this stuff at the same time. And this thing about, well, now I'm not going to travel with a woman, or I'm not going to do that. So that's like, how convenient.
No, listen. To me, I think it's a non-starter as an answer to the question.
Yeah.
Just act appropriately. You shouldn't have to change anything you do.
Yeah, give me their names.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And Ignition tries to focus on the future,
right,
what's happening in media and marketing, and bringing it back to where we first, engaged and got the chance to work together. And as I mentioned, you began your career at an advertising agency.
Right.
It's such a different game today.
Right.
And it's such, the players are different. Today, marketing, and you and I chatted about this the other day, Procter & Gamble for so long spoke about the final moment of truth for their consumer was in the shopping, in the supermarket or at the drugstore in the aisle, right, when you choose their product.
It was all about the end cap.
Right, and that was that final moment of truth. The final moment of truth today is in your conversation with Alexa, right, or certainly in an online experience. That's the final moment of truth where the consumer, where she's making that choice right there, not the way she made it before. How are you dealing with that in the context of Bank of America? Because that assistant, that Alexa, whichever device we end up choosing, is going to make your marketing decisions for you. It's where you're going to get the information.
Well, actually, all this has been good for us. So the first thing is we have 50 million customers. We probably have like 30 billion touch points that are not physical with our customers, either online. I mean, online banking is so big, or transfer of money, that sort of thing. We also have a virtual assistant in a product called Erica. So you can ask Erica in the same way you would use Alexa, and Erica is a derivative of the word America. What's my balance? Can you transfer this? Can you pay that? Please pay this bill.
Could I call her?
Yes. As long as you're a customer, and I know that you are.
There you go. Absolutely.
So first of all, we use it, artificial intelligence, both for that and also in terms of predictive modeling. I mean, the whole thing in financial services is predictive modeling for life priorities, and if you can anticipate what your next product to buy would be, is largely based on where you are in your
in the cycle.
In the cycle. So we embrace it, but I would tell you that.
But so that's artificial intelligence that's supplementing the information and the data you're getting. And
yeah, that's on the product. Right. On the marketing, probably 70% of what we do is mobile or social and not traditional media, but I still see a role for traditional media. I think those media companies, and I say this very broadly because I think of the Washington Post and Facebook both as media companies. I know there's dialogue about whether Facebook's a technology company, but it is indeed still a media company to us. Those that can look at it horizontally and vertically are the ones that we do business with.
And that brings up a good question. You obviously do business across the spectrum. You do business with the traditional companies, the traditional media companies that we all know, the bold-faced names that we know. But you've also done lots of test and learn and real projects, and are an important partner of Facebook and Google and Snap and Vice and BuzzFeed and you know, a lot of these that are getting close to household names, certainly.
Right.
And this one's a tough question to answer, but do you feel that the promise of the emerging companies is being delivered in terms of the goals you set with them? Because you're very prescribed. I mean, and I mean that with a great compliment. You know what you want. You're clear as a marketer, and now in your role as vice chairman, of what the KPIs should look like. You establish them. I mean, it's no baloney with you as a partner. Are you getting what you expect from the emerging companies? Are they delivering the promise?
Yeah, some are and some aren't, and sometimes we're not the best partner either. So you have you agree on an outcome, but if I mean, in many of these emerging companies, there's a little bit of a bet here. So if you're doing a program with an emerging company, shall we say, and you agree on what the content of the program is, you've got to have some flexibility as well as expecting them to sort of skate to the puck of what we're trying to achieve. So I do believe in partnerships. A command and control just doesn't work. So if I were to have KPIs and I just expected them to deliver, and I were Attila the Hun on the other side of that, what did I get out of it, let alone what did they get out of it? So you have to be pretty flexible about, this didn't work, but maybe it didn't work because we didn't have the right story. I mean, I really believe everything is about storytelling, everything. If you can put together a beginning, middle, and end that you know is compelling to your audience, and then you go to the right audience and you deliver on that, and then you don't think everything's cookie cutter. So what you're doing on Facebook is not the same as Snapchat, which is not the same as Vice, which is not the same as what we're putting on in a 30-second commercial, but it should integrate the same way that you kind of live your life integrates, and it nets to something. That's the value. So any one of those could have delivered, but in aggregate, maybe it didn't because we didn't get it right. So we have to be thinking in that with that kind of flexibility. We did not have to do that 10 years ago.
A fair point. And I want to end with something that's highly important to you, and I talked about it at the beginning, so I made a promise at the beginning, and I want to make sure I deliver on it now. If you could talk a bit about, you know, that concept of doing well and doing good, and how your program around environmental and social and the governance issues, how are you seeing that manifest itself? And is the support there from the community? And do you get the appropriate respect back from your consumer base, from your customer base, for being specific to that? One of the big stories was when the LEED building that your New York office, I mean...
Oh, yeah, the first LEED skyscraper, platinum skyscraper.
Yeah, I mean, you've actually not just... My grandmother used to say, don't read people's lips, watch their feet. So you've actually not only said the things, you've actually done the things.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that to kind of wrap up today?
Sure. So the idea of capital deployment is, I mean, financial institutions are like financial transportation systems. We either help you make something happen or we don't, and we'd like to help make things happen. So we'd like to move the economies forward. That helps us. So in this case, in the environmental space, or probably more generally in the sort of UN sustainable development goals, these are hard things to tackle. It's hard to get water to places that are, you know, don't have water, or to help women in small businesses in third world countries. But if you can get others to join with you, you can reduce risk. So we've been able to do that by working with other financial institutions and development banks, European Development Bank, the World Bank here, and with nonprofits, and using different tranches of financing. So that would be philanthropic dollars, development dollars, commercial bank dollars, private equity dollars, all stacking up against one problem where we are looking for a blended return. So obviously, if we were looking for something that was like a municipal bond, like a 3%, and private equity wanted something greater, on a collective basis, we can move things forward that we never would have been able to do before, like a wildlife sanctuary in Kenya, or a wind farm in the North Sea, or a solar for 30,000 homes in Spain that we simply wouldn't have been able to do. I would say, bringing this back to the media, we also could do none of this without the role of social media, which has really been the breakthrough for us, because you have to, as I said before, you have to be able to tell a story beginning, middle, and end. And it doesn't really acclimate itself particularly effectively to TV commercials, nor to even sort of more traditional media. It works beautifully in social media, getting the story out, but not only getting the story out, but getting feedback and then improving from there.
And there's so much more I'd love to talk about in this current environment, but unfortunately we're out of time. I want to thank you for taking the time this morning, and I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you,
all
Michael.
Good. Thank you
all.
Please join us in the Getty Lounge for a short break.
Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should?
It's like you want to see the people rebel and fire gunshot and burn buildings to the low. After that you are gonna treat me well. It's like you have the people on the spell. Sitting at home, talking to the people in the Congress. We vote you mean, so you better do your best to do. After all, man, no contest. It's the State of the Union address.
People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should? People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should?
Broadcasting lies on the television screen, trying to get us hooked on your American dream. Up on the games, if you know what you mean, when you cheated on your wife with your monies and your scheme. People rule and not hard to be follow. We are no fool and no calm in no nana. You are the term and you deserve no nana. So musical and your section never sleep in
People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should? People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should?
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes.
People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should? People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should? People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should? People in a misery. Government a work, but government them is a mockery. Respect to the youth where they in front and all they back of me. Why you don't treat them like the way you should?
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please welcome Anish Rajaram with Steve Kovac.
All right, welcome back. So I have Anish here. He's the CEO of Viewed. Now, a lot of people here are probably Viewed users, and they don't even know it. So why don't you just give them a quick explanation of what Viewed does before we really dive in?
Sure, Steve. So firstly, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and share the story of Viewed, as well as talk a little bit about the OTT space. So Viewed really is the world's largest enabler of streaming television. Every year, nearly 50 million devices around the world ship with our software. So we create software that enables streaming television.
These are just TVs with smarts built into them, right?
That's right. So you have smart TV vendors such as Sony, Vizio, and Hisense, set-top box providers such as TiVo, Aris, Gemcom, pay TV operators such as Verizon, Swisscom, Sky in the UK. All of them rely on Viewed to enable the streaming experiences on their devices. And on the other hand, you have content owners such as YouTube, Amazon, Hulu, Pandora, Spotify. They rely on Viewed to distribute their apps and content to these 50 million devices globally. So really, if you think about us, we unite this entire very complicated ecosystem together. And we're really the Switzerland of the space. So we enable all of these rivalries to exist and enable end users to consume the content that they love.
And you, I don't know if spun out is the right word, but you started with Opera, right? Which is the web browser, that the open source web browser. Now you're transitioning this to television, right?
That's right. So Viewed is a new name in the industry, if you think about it, because we only launched our brand 3 months ago at IBC in Amsterdam. But really, our history is, for over a decade, we operated as a TV division inside Opera Software, the makers of the famous Opera web browser. And we launched the first smart TV back in 2007 as the TV division of Opera, together with Philips. We enabled the world's first streaming device, which is really the Nintendo Wii, back in 2006.
Wow.
So our history with smart TV and OTT go back over a decade, but we recently rebranded as Viewed as recent as 3 months ago.
Great. And so a good way, I guess, to think of it is you guys are one of the biggest app stores on smart TVs, right? Is that a
right?
proper
But
analogy?
it's more than smart TVs.
Yeah.
So we also have the pay TV operator ecosystem. We have Blu-ray players such as LG,
Right.
Samsung, and Panasonic. So you could safely say that we're the world's largest connected TV ecosystem, given that we're shipping our software on nearly 50 million devices a year.
Great. So let's talk about the space as a whole. So we have these big players, Netflix, Amazon, and so forth. Why don't you talk a little bit about the other guys? There are these niche channels out there. What kind of growth are you seeing there, and what is your advice to these more niche channels as they experiment with this space?
Yeah, obviously. So OTT is a big opportunity. If you think about OTT, it's really flattening the world. You see people that invested earlier on, such as Netflix and YouTube, they've created very, very large engineering teams inside their organizations, sensing the global opportunity that OTT will provide.
And Netflix did that. So about 2 years ago, they just flicked a switch, and Netflix was global.
They were global, exactly. So they built all the know-how in-house to be able to actually make that opportunity global. So if you think about the smaller niche content players, it's tremendously hard to build those engineering organizations and compete with the likes of Netflix and YouTube on technology. But guess what? There are players like View, there are players like Roku, there are players like Android TV that provide these content owners with all the tools that they need to actually get out there and get their content in front of the end users. Previously, this was hard before OTT came about. Now OTT has really flattened that world and made it easy for them to get in front of audiences.
And would you say that's a good thing? I mean, back in the day, before OTT was a thing, if I wanted to start a channel about, I don't know, yoga exercises or something, I would have to convince a cable company to carry me. Now it's much different, right? I just build an app on your platform, and boom, I have users.
That's exactly it. And also the cost of actually distributing your content via OTT is very attractive. Granted, the economics are vastly different from what you have on traditional pay TV channels. But for niche providers of content, OTT is certainly the path to market.
And then talk a little bit about, so to use the buzzwords, cord cutting, cord nevering. More and more people are gravitating towards these OTT services. Obviously, everyone's going to do Netflix, obviously, or HBO and Hulu and the big guys. But then there are these smaller ones. How do you view down the road these new kind of internet bundles looking like, where you just kind of pick and choose the streaming services that work for you? What does that look like?
Well, so there are two parts to your question, really. So let's take the first one first, which is what will the device landscape look for over-the-top television consumption? So what we're seeing really is that we're reaching the peak of possibilities as it relates to consumers' choice for consuming streaming television. But at the same time, what we're also seeing is that the most popularized format for consuming this was streaming devices, and that's actually on the decline. So
streaming devices meaning like
meaning devices such as Roku and Amazon's Fire TV devices, Chromecast, Apple TV. As a category, streaming devices are actually on the decline. If you think about just Black Friday and Cyber Monday now, there was, I think, about 15 billion worth of sales, and the largest category was actually smart TV. And so smart TV is the only category, given smart TVs, streaming media players, Blu-ray players, set-top boxes, smart set-top boxes. If you take all these categories that enable streaming television, game consoles included, smart TV is the only category that's growing. So we see smart TV as really the future, given by a number of other trends that match and speak to that future. So these streaming services that are looking to launch towards consumers first have to start taking notice that the platform to be on for the future is actually smart TV. That's the first thing they need to accept. And the second thing is that the opportunity to promote their content on smart TV and to rely that there's a quality experience provided to end consumers is actually here today. So these smart TV platforms have gotten very powerful. Users can actually expect to get a good quality of experience off the services on the platform.
Now, they're powerful, but it's also insanely fragmented. So we have Samsung has their own thing, LG has their own, there's Viewed, there's Apple TV, there's Android TV, there's Roku, what am I missing? Amazon.
Yep.
So when you're working with these developers, obviously it's easy for a Netflix to just go out there and just make an app that works on all these platforms. What about the other more niche, smaller guys?
Yeah, so thankfully you do have tools from each and every one of these ecosystems you spoke about. So to break that down, Tizen from Samsung is probably in the US the largest by volume, by shipment. Second is actually Viewed. We're sitting with close to 30% of the market in the US. And then you got LG and Roku and the others coming on board. Android is actually very, very small portion of the global smart TV market, including in the US. So, but each and every one of these ecosystems offer tools for content owners to bring their content to audiences. And you also have a whole host of agencies, small agencies, large agencies like BAMTech, that are very willing to help these content owners get onto those platforms. So you're right, it is fragmented. We're doing our part to unite as much as we can of that fragmentation. But I do think that in the next years, that fragmentation would dissolve.
Yeah, what does that look like? Does that look like consolidation? Do the smaller ones fail and disappear, and then people kind of gravitate towards one or two platforms? What do you think that looks like?
Yeah, so you are seeing the sort of mid to long tail of these operating system fragmentations disappear. And that's being united by players such as Viewed and Roku. So really, I think in the long term, what you will see is, I don't think that we're going to reach the dynamics of the mobile ecosystem where you have just two key players to focus on. And the reason for that is, you got to go down to the way these TVs are built and the cost structure of these TVs. You have high-end TVs, you have mid-end TVs, you have low-end TVs. They all have different bill of materials. Some of these operating systems are only propositions for the high-end TVs, such as Android TV.
Right.
But if Sony wants to ship a mid to low-end TV, they can't stick Android on those TVs yet. So they have to fragment the operating system environment. What we can do for them is make sure that no matter which operating system they choose, will be on there.
Right.
So for content owners, it means you're just building for one ecosystem.
Right, and so your play here is you can work on the $4,000 TVs, but you can also work on the $400 TVs.
That's right. We can work on the Android TV, we can work on the Roku TV, we can work on Samsung's WebOS, Tizen, or LG's WebOS if we should.
Great. So I want to talk about something that has a lot of people worried in the OTT world, and that's the impending repeal of net neutrality. By all indications, it seems like on December 14th, those regulations here in the US are going to go out the window. You guys are based in Europe. There are different rules out there. I got two parts to this question. First part is, what are you seeing in Europe as far as the regulations, how that affects investment and OTT services? And then what are you hearing from people here in the US as this repeal just looms closer and closer?
Sure, that's a great question. Hot topic of the moment, so
Yes.
we should address it. So firstly, the first part of the question, what are we seeing in Europe? Completely the opposite. Short story. I live in Norway. Viewed is headquartered in Norway, and we just signed the net neutrality laws that the EU proposed to support net neutrality. But really what we're seeing is that net neutrality is becoming more pervasive in Europe. People are respecting net neutrality. You have some countries such as the UK and Portugal that are in the mobile landscape going a slightly different direction or experimenting with a different direction. But by and large, there's a lot of unity around net neutrality in Europe. It's fundamental for the openness of society in Europe because content should operate on a level playing field. That's the belief. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing in the US is, it's a little bit worrying because it's likely going in the opposite direction. And what that means is that the niche content owners especially, take for example, we have some partners producing fantastic environmental content in 4K or extreme sports in 4K. For them to transmit that content to their audience, which we've now established will be an OTT-first audience, is going to become more and more challenging.
Right. So
the economics just don't work out.
They're trying to build a business on this new kind of platform, something they could have never done before without the internet, without these connected devices. And now they have this major barrier looming on them here in the US.
Exactly. So the economics don't work out. The end subscriber or the enthusiasts lose out because they can't consume that content on 4K in their television because of the quality of experience they might expect. And really, it lends to a winner-take-all scenario where the people that can spend will win. That's really not the world that we're at least trying to create at Viewed.
So the little guys lose. Who's the winners? The Comcasts, the Netflixes.
That's right.
The Amazons.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so just another trend in Europe, what we're seeing is that the large communication providers, they're actually investing in infrastructure to support this plethora of OTT that's coming the consumer's way.
Right.
And they're looking at rolling back some of the profits they make from selling broadband into infrastructure to increase the capacity of the pipe. So it's a completely different model of thinking. And I'm really eager to hear the next session, of course, which I'm sure Lawrence is going to give us a bit of a flavor.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll dive into that. That's also interesting what you said about investment, because one of Chairman Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC, one of his key arguments is that because of these net neutrality rules we have now, broadband companies aren't investing and making it easier for these companies to do it. Let's take away these shackles of regulation, and then suddenly it's going to open up. But what you're saying in Europe, which has in many countries these protections, the investment's already happening.
That's right. They're happening where all consumers of those investments today, we're getting fantastic 4K experiences from various different content owners via OTT on our streaming devices.
So hopefully Ajit Pai is watching now. I'm sure he's listening very carefully. Let's talk a little bit about another thing we're seeing in OTT. Over the last year and a half, 2 years, we've seen the expansion of these live TV services. So I think I've lost count. There's Sling TV, YouTube TV, Hulu's going live. Amazon was thinking about it, but they kind of decided not to do it. AT&T and DirecTV, I think I didn't say them yet, they have their own product. So today, if I'm a cord cutter or a cord neverer, I can still get live TV. Is that what the future of live looks like? I have to kind of get these skinny bundles from various places, or just talk a little bit about that, this new trend, yeah.
Yeah, so the future of live TV is massive opportunity for consumers to consume the live TV content they want at their terms. That's where we see it going. So if you break down the actual stats that play into this trend, you're looking at last quarter alone, somewhere around 1 million net subscriber additions for these virtual MVPD platforms. At the same time, you were looking at nearly 900,000 subscribers lost on traditional pay TV subscriptions. So there's certainly some shift taking place, also compounded by the arrival of cord nevers into the scene. But what you need to remember as well is that since 2014, there's only been 9 million subscribers lost. I say only, but it's a large number. But
that's not, yeah.
But it really means that 90% of pay TV subscribers that existed in 2014 still exist today. And that's not going away anytime soon, right? So that's a really, really large market that will continue to exist. We can help those pay TV operators transition their experiences to have more blended linear and OTT experiences. But at the same time, consumers can win because they can get access to that content through services like the ones you mentioned on any device they choose.
Right.
So I think both worlds will exist. We're not going to see one world is going to win in at least in the next 5 years. So it's just more opportunity.
So you don't think someone like DirecTV or AT&T, I mean, they've even hinted at this. They said, we would love to approach a future where we don't have to have a guy come and bolt a satellite dish to your house so you can get television. They would love to, especially with 5G coming and things like that, they see an OTT opportunity there. You see that growing, but not totally replacing. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. There is an opportunity.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I said. But at the same time, the trend that you point out to is absolutely true. So when these companies look at their balance sheets and they see the amount of costs they take when it relates to set-top boxes, they want to get that off. And they want to see that they can launch their proposition as a virtual MVPD service as an app. But at the same time, the competitive landscape, once you do become an app, there's a lot of challenges of the ecosystems that exist around the multitude of choice you have with MVPDs. So there is that conservatism that exists as well. And they are looking to own the subscriber, own the access to the remote control, and continue to ship boxes as well, but embrace the trend of virtual OTT MVPD services.
And then I want to talk to you about the hottest player in this space right now. There's Roku. Roku just had a very successful IPO. Their stock went through the roof after their first earnings call, I think. What are they doing right now, and why is everyone talking about Roku, and why are they so hot?
Sure. So I mean, fantastic company, by the way. They've created, what they did right is they verticalized the entire stack. So they created the hardware, they created the software, they created a great user experience around that software, and launched it through their streaming devices and expanded the range of streaming devices. I think what they're going to struggle with is really to get into smart TVs. So given the growth that I said earlier on,
right,
all the growth is in smart TV. And I think Roku has also been saying they want to be the operating system on smart TV. But there are just fundamental pillars of strength that are so established in the smart TV industry that it's very, very hard to displace a WebOS or a Tizen or Viewed or these kind of players that have been there for over a decade and built very strong relationships down to the silicon. So just to give you an example, we work across 10 different silicon providers, from the Taiwanese to the Chinese to the American silicon providers. And that's taken a long time to establish those strengths of relationships. So, but whereas, Roku, when they're trying to enter the smart TV space, need to switch out those existing relationships, not just between us and silicon vendors, but also between the manufacturers and silicon vendors, where there's a lot of economics involved and a long history of those economics. So I think that's where they might struggle. But overall, I think they're doing a lot of things right when it relates to the user experience, the seamless nature of consuming
it's a
OTT
great
content.
UI and things like that. So how are you guys thinking? You have the app portion of it. They have a great UI. Their mission is to kind of become the operating system for smart televisions. You guys don't really have that. You're mostly the back-end type stuff, if I understand correctly. How do you guys think about the user experience?
Well, we're there for now. So,
Yeah.
so just to paint the picture, I think globally, Roku roughly sit at about 4.1% of market share, where we're approaching 30% very fast.
Inside smart TVs.
Inside smart TVs.
Not for the boxes, right?
Exactly. So fundamentally, we're a much larger player. But as it relates to your question, obviously we're seeing opportunities to come out from behind the scenes and enabling all of the experiences that we have let manufacturers enable and help them enable more futuristic experiences. I can't say more today, but I look forward to telling you more at CES when we'll do a great launch.
Okay, look forward to that. And then finally, to wrap it up, I just kind of want to quiz you about some of the other big players on the content side about this. Disney, I think it was earlier this year, they finally announced we're going to go all in on streaming. Huge move from them, obviously. How do you view what Disney's position is in this? Are they coming too late to this, especially since Netflix has really taken over and we've seen CBS experimenting with this? What do you think of Disney's position now doing OTT?
Well, I wouldn't say they're coming too late. So firstly, the connectivity of these actual OTT devices has just started to peak, and they will continue to accelerate over the coming years. So it's the right time to get in, but it's not too late to get in. With regards to technology, there are players they can work with and vendors they can work with who figure this out for them. Netflix and YouTube, when they got into this game, there weren't so many vendors they could work with, so they had to really work through figuring out how to make smart TV or connected devices work. So no, I don't think it's too late. I think the opportunity still exists. I think it's a global opportunity, and that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Because your audiences, like we saw yesterday, when Netflix's subscriber numbers were shown, majority of them are actually international subscribers today. So you can already hit the ground running, provided you own the content on a global basis. And I think they should do that and work with players like us and others to really distribute their propositions globally.
And then finally, one other big company making moves here is, I want to get your thoughts on the AT&T and Time Warner merger. Do you think that's a good thing for OTT services, a bad thing? Do you think they could use their powerful position to stifle others? What do you think?
Well, there's a whole lot more to that entire equation. As it relates to OTT specifically, there's a number of ways to look at it. There are devices that could consolidate. So for instance, you could have one device that is deployed across the entire ATT and DirecTV proposition. Well, granted that you might compete with Time Warner Cable's content on the same portfolio of devices that are out there. But it remains to be seen. It's too early days to know where that will go. I read just yesterday that they are willing to make some concessions, for instance, on the blackouts.
Right.
So there is some willingness to open up that ecosystem, or let's say that consolidated company, should that actually go through. But it's too early days to make a comment on what the landscape will look like.
Great. All right, that's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome Lawrence Lessig.
So I've just finished a book. It's a little bit depressing title. It makes it seem like I'm against democracy, and I'm not, because I actually think that the sense in which democracy sucks is completely fixable. But the book is describing both how they suck, how the government sucks, but how we suck, too. And what Spencer wanted me to do was to set up the conversation we're going to have by talking about one particular slice about how we could think about how we suck. Okay, so let's start with two things, thing one and thing two, right? So thing one is going to be how we know the things we know. And thing two is going to be how we know what we know. So what we know, in the sense of how do we know what the public knows about any issue of public import? Thing one, thing two, and I want you to think about these two things in three separate contexts, roughly the 19th century, the 20th century, and the 21st century. Okay, the 19th century. The first question, how did we know? And the answer to that question is we knew through no broadcasting. We knew through hundreds of sources that were fragmented and diverse, meaning that common knowledge of the people in common was extremely thin. That's how we knew. And then you ask the question, how did we know what we knew? And the answer is, who the frack knows? Because there was no polling back then. There was no Facebook algorithm back then. All we could do was to interpret the public, which means the will of the people was essentially invisible, irrelevant. Policymaking was by policymaking elites. So if somebody stood up and says, what does the public want? The response of the elites was something like this. Okay, that's the 19th century. Now we move to the 20th century, and there are two massive technological changes. Number one, broadcasting, and especially television, which produces not just concentration in the construction of what we know. Even as late as 1977, 90% of people got their news from 3 television networks, but also in the way that it addicts people to watch these 3 networks. Irresistible and understandable, which means incredibly egalitarian. More citizens become engaged in this mainstream and trusted sources for what's going on in the world. There's a common understanding held in common, a common set of facts that provides the basis for public discourse. That's change one. Change two is produced by this guy. He apparently had time to go do his interview. Polling, a technology that begins about the first third of the 20th century, giving us a practical way to know what the people knew. Now, this had been the long-time dream of democratic theorists. James Bryce said it was the final stage in the evolution of democracy when we could know the will of the majority of the citizens at any particular time. But because of thing one, the fact of broadcasting, this was a very special public that knew the things it knew and that we could study through polling, because common knowledge, as we get to the last part of the 20th century, is thick. And that produces incredibly important progress on critical issues that are central to public life at the time. And this makes a respectable public. It makes a normatively significant public. It makes it so that when somebody says 70% of the public believes something, that matters in political life. Okay, and then we come to the 21st century, where there is one massive relevant technological change, the birth of the internet, which means broadcasting is dead. It means that the sources become as multiple, many, many, many sources, as they were 150 and 200 years ago. Now, this is a great thing for culture. The diversity and the spread of culture here is massive and unprecedented, but it's a terrible thing for democracy, because it produces a fragmented public, which means a diffuse public, which means no common story here, no common sense of facts, no common sensibility to define the project of democracy. Now you can say, well, this is just us going back to the 19th century, but it's not the 19th century. In the 19th century, the people were silent. They couldn't hear the people, so the people didn't speak. But in the 21st century, the people can't stop blathering. And this blather is measured in polls, presumptively normatively relevant. The normative public remains a part of our democratic universe. But this public is ignorant. I don't mean stupid. There's no question of public import that I wouldn't trust an informed public to resolve, but they are ignorant, because this public doesn't have a common set of facts to understand the issues that the public needs to resolve. And this public is increasingly just embarrassing. Now, in a sense, this is totally unfair to us. Justice Breyer's a smart guy, but nobody would think that you could stop him on the street and ask him about admiralty law without giving him a brief and an opportunity to debate with his clerks and listen to oral arguments. We used to have presidents that spent an extraordinary amount of time studying issues before they would stand up and speak about them, and when they were questioned, they knew something because they had prepared in that sense. Even Congress people stand on the floor of the House and speak having had an opportunity to think and to reflect. They get staff. But we, as we were called in the middle of the night and asked about trade policy or about whether we should invade Iraq, we get no staff. We have no opportunity to reflect or be informed. And so what do you expect will come from this question we ask the people when we say to the people, what do you believe we should do? It's totally unfair to us and to democracy. And here's the two problems this creates. First of all, the crazy talk that comes from this way of understanding the people bends policy. People say what things should be, and the policymakers think we have to listen to that because this is the people speaking. That's number one. And number two, maybe worse, the crazy talk is used to diss democracy. Increasingly, people use this as a way to say, look, we've got to move beyond this experiment. We've tried it for 100 years. It was a pretty cool idea. But now we've got to find new ways, technocracy, or new ways, elite governance, to get us to where we need to go. I don't think that response is the right response. Indeed, I think the solution here is really pretty simple, pretty obvious solution, but oh, I'm sorry, I'm out of time, so I can't give you the solution here. We'll just have to stop with that. Thank you very much.
And now, Ignition Program Director Spencer Reese will join Professor Lessig for a conversation.
Thank you. So you're not out of time. You see, I saved you. If we were talking in the room just now, if we went back to 1997, which is a dim vision now, everything was going to be fabulous. Everybody would have a voice. Everybody would be heard. Nations would rise up. Democracy would flourish. If you then fast forward to today, and you look and we have a kind of an ultra-dominant social media force, which is the avenue which would have been derided as a walled garden and hopelessly antiquated. We've got filter bubbles and mob rule and people getting, literally, I mean, it's astonishing how fast things are happening now. What did we miss? I mean, what were we looking at the wrong things? Were we not seeing hidden dangers that were really there?
Well, I think there are two things we missed. One thing we missed was the importance of what we now think of as editors. We used to call them censors, right? What we thought 20 years ago was that the internet would flourish because we'd remove the censors. You could stand and say whatever you wanted, and whether what you said was important to people was depend upon whether people wanted to receive it or not. But that forgot that there was an extremely important role played by people in the middle, not censoring, but in some sense, credentialing. Moderating, right. And so what that meant is that we've developed an infrastructure that makes us vulnerable to this extraordinary opportunity of people to speak directly without any of this kind of moderating. So that's the first thing we've missed. The second thing we missed, and the thing that I'm most obsessed with, is we needed, and we need desperately now, to have a capacity to govern, to make choices about what's the right policy to have when these problems confront us. Now, I'm not a big regulator. I don't think we ought to be regulating 1,000 ways. And though I was involved in the early network neutrality regulation, I think this is a very simple way the objectives of network neutrality could be brought about with minimal regulation. But the point is, we have to have a government that can make policy choices that in some sense make sense and are not driven by the incredibly pathological dependence that they have on the people who happen to fund their campaigns. And so the fact that we don't have a government at the moment when we're confronting this extraordinary consolidation in companies and in data and the emergence of things like AI, the fact that we don't have a government that any of us trust to make judgments about these issues sensibly, I think is our biggest threat right now.
Well, is part of the, I mean, there's really two things. I mean, there's government, and then there's the way governments are created, which is democracy. You know, they're not the same thing. And is it a problem that right now, the machine that we have to create governments, which is called democracy and elections and all that, is in the grips of this kind of mania that we talk of fake news and filter bubbles, all those things. And are we in like a kind of a paralysis where the government isn't going to change because the underlying basis that would do that is, even though everybody hates the government, left and right, they're not going to agree on a government that could fix this. I mean, are we in a hopeless situation, to be not too grim?
Maybe. Maybe in a hopeless situation. I mean, what's striking about America right now is we are a deeply bipolar nation. On the one hand, we are as divided as we have been since the Civil War, in a partisan division sense. But on the other hand, we are as united as we've ever been in our view that this government is deeply corrupted. Right. There's an amazing study done by University of Maryland in the middle of last year, where they found literally the highest level of anger and frustration at our government. And if you looked at why, the reasons given by Democrats and Republicans were exactly the same, literally no statistical difference. So too much money in politics, corporations having too much influence, lobbyists having too much of a role. These are reasons that all Americans believe accounts for the fact that we don't have a representative government. But the problem we have is that the politics of division, the politics of hate, right, can't leverage the common ground. They can't even talk about the common ground. They can't talk about it as if it's common ground.
Part of the problem isn't the politics of hate work.
Absolutely.
They get people elected.
Yeah.
And that's, if you had to, the takeaway for me looking at the Trump thing is, oh my God, the big question, is Trump like a fluke? Or is he the future of the American presidency? And I could argue the latter pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely, because the politics of hate says to rise to the top on either the right or the left is to be as extreme as you can be. So you motivate the base. So you see the Democratic Party develop a candidate who is as powerful, a progressive as possible. And if it's Trump, okay, it's Trump. If it's not Trump, it'll still be somebody who's extremely strong on the right. That's the logic of succeeding inside of this political system. But the point is, the person who rises to the top of the Democratic Party like that is a person who automatically alienates half of the rest of the public. And so if you say, look, this common point that we've got to solve, this fixing a democracy, so that we have the ability to address these really important questions sensibly, this common point, can we deal with that? Neither of these two extremists are going to be able to leverage the power.
So, I mean, the class, what is to be done? Do we tell Facebook that, you can't use algorithmic controls, but on the other hand, then you really have mob rule? Problems can be solved two ways, okay? You can either solve them from the top, and I don't have a lot of confidence in the guys at the top right now being able to get their hands around all this, or they can get solved from the bottom, but it's really hard to see that either. I mean, and you start a social campaign, don't just say no to Facebook. Everybody get off Facebook because it's bad for America. Do you break up Facebook? Do you break up Google? Instinctively somebody would say, well, let's make the problems smaller at least by breaking them up and having lots of them. But then maybe you end up with a right-wing Facebook and a left-wing Facebook. And you're even in worse situation, then you've doubled your problems. Yeah. Do you have and I know this is this is not an easy one.
No, and I think we have to recognize how hard it is. Because we've never dealt with this kind of monopoly problem before. This is a monopoly at the layer of the data. This is a data layer monopoly problem. Every single major company is trying to take control of the data layer. And every one of the 5 is a data company. That's ultimately what they are. And we don't have the economics, let alone the political will, to figure out how we deal with data monopoly like this. And my view is, a lot of people are writing these really self-righteous books about the obvious solutions, like privacy regulation or break them up. And that feels good because it feels like there's an answer here. But those are just too simplistic in a way of thinking of how you're going to solve this kind of problem. And so, that's why it's too hard for me. I want to take the step before. I'm just a lawyer here, so I want to take the step before. And the step before I'm going to insist on is we can't begin to hope to be able to deal with these sensibly unless we have people in the government who can try to think about what makes sense as opposed to what raises campaign dollars or what allows them to do the work they need to do for the people funding their campaign.
And yet, ironically, this same machine is also a great money-raising machine.
Absolutely.
That's another, now suddenly it's turning out that you don't even have to, sure, corporate donors and whatever are still, but you can also just turn on the hate and outrage machines and get the money the same way.
Absolutely, and they are so, look, members of Congress spend 30 to 70% of their time raising money. They're calling people all the time, and who are they calling? They're calling rich people. They're learning how to be sycophants to these powerful people to raise the money they need. Is there any surprise that they then turn around and are incapable of leading in any major area and thinking independently about what the right answer is in any of these major areas?
Well, then, I mean, just take something like data, okay? I mean, obviously, yeah, there's some cursory efforts to, quote, protect people's privacy. But basically, the whole, for 100 years, as you mentioned, we've been worried about communications. It's always been, oh my God, that's why it's the Federal Communications Commission, not the Federal Data Commission, although maybe we should have one. Maybe there should be a Federal Data Commission that can start to, because right now there's no mechanism. The FCC goes, not our job. FTC kind of goes, well, don't do anything too awful, but whatever. And nobody has any handle on any of this. Do we need to have people like at Harvard, and stuff actually really look at what you need to run a functioning real democracy in an environment where you have this hypercharged super social media? I mean, it's a very unique problem.
Yeah, we need that, and there's plenty of that study going on. Okay. But we also need the capacity to implement what the fixes should be. Right. And again, it seems to me we're just too simplistic in thinking about the solutions that are out there. It's 20 years ago, literally, I think it's today, 20 years ago today, Judge Jackson asked me to be the special master in the Microsoft case. And in that case, the ultimate decision was whether they were going to split up Microsoft, and for some stupid reason it didn't happen. But if they'd split up Microsoft, nobody would have been upset, except maybe Microsoft, and they shouldn't have been, but nobody would have been upset at all, right? It wouldn't have changed their life at all. But if you imagine splitting up Amazon, or splitting up Facebook, or splitting up any of these data companies, it really does change the way in which they interact with you. And the point is there wouldn't be the kind of political support for that kind of intervention that there was 20 years ago when the government was thinking about how to break up.
So do we have to hope for, in a funny way, Trump being less partisan in a wacky way, he's less of a Republican than a lot of Republicans would like him to be. He's certainly not a Democrat. Do we have to wait for the arrival of some genius-level Trump who can simultaneously appeal to a large enough group of people to get everything together and then have the vision to, is that what we have to kind of basically sit around waiting for?
Well, look, I think it was completely unfair, but the wonderful thing Trump did was to frame that election for a significant part of the people, of the group that voted for him, frame that election around the corruption of this government. Drain the swamp, corrupt Hillary. I think it was complete bullshit, but am I allowed to say that? I don't know. But I think that was unfair, but that's the way it was framed. And so it's set up, I'm going and I'm going to clean up Washington. And of course, the swamp hasn't been drained. The demand, the latent demand for fixing this is still there. So I think a less ignorant version of that movement could be really successful.
With good tweeting capabilities.
Yeah, with better tweeting. Could be really real potential. And it is, in my view, I think the only hope. If you don't get people rally behind the idea that we've got to put aside our difference for a minute and agree, the fundamental thing we agree on is we've got to get a government that represents us. If we could solve that problem, then I think it's at least possible to imagine solving these other problems.
Unfortunately, we really are now out of time. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
please welcome Tucker Carlson with Nicholas Carlson.
I guess I didn't ask you this, but there's no relation, I don't think.
In some meta sense, probably.
We are Carlsons. Hello. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, great. So, I watched your show last night, and it was great. It was very entertaining and fun. What I want to know is, there's a question I want to ask you at the beginning of this interview, and then I want you to not answer it now, but answer it at the end of the interview. This is a little weird, but I want to know, did you vote for Donald Trump this year?
Okay.
Last year, I suppose. And to which party are you registered, if any at all?
And you want to remain in suspense?
I do. I kind of want them to think, oh, I wonder if, I want some of them to think, oh, I didn't even know that it's possible that he didn't vote for Donald Trump, perhaps.
Huh.
So anyway, okay. So let's,
That's an odd convention, but I'm willing to roll with it.
I'm trying something new. Let's do it, okay? So, all right?
Done.
Okay, good. All right, so look, I think the big news is Matt Lauer, NBC News, sexual harassment everywhere, the reckoning, the Me Too reckoning, so to speak. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's awful. I mean, abuse of power is always awful. Any kind of power. Sexual power, financial power, any kind of power. It's also really common. People abuse their power by definition. That's just a function of human nature. So I don't think it's surprising. The details are always sort of jarring and jaw-dropping, and someone really did that. I mean, it's shocking, especially when it happens in an industry you're familiar with to people you know, and it's even more awful in a way. But if you take 3 steps back, I mean, it shouldn't surprise you that famous people who sort of bask in public adulation all day long behave poorly when the cameras are off.
That's interesting because one of the things that you said last night, which is a great show again, talking about NBC, you're sort of, some of these people are hypocrites, like here they are reporting on Donald Trump and Roy Moore and.
I don't think I made that point. But
maybe I misheard it, so.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think it's totally, look, I mean, we're all hypocrites,
right?
On some level. And that's probably a good thing. And politeness is hypocrisy. How are you this morning? I'm great. How are you? I'm fine. We're both hungover, but for the sake of getting along, we both pretend we're fine. I mean, there's artifice that allows us to get along, and that's okay. That's what manners are. And so I actually try not to hit people too hard on hypocrisy, just because, I think it's a human thing. But I guess I couldn't resist noting that NBC fired Billy Bush for the crime of, I don't know, laughing, for which he apologized, and then, squelched the Harvey Weinstein story that Ronan, the fantastic story that Ronan Farrow wound up selling to the New Yorker, and why? I don't know. I think it's a fair question, and they haven't answered it. So, I mean, that annoyed me because I watched it carefully. But no, I worked at NBC for 4 years. I have a lot of friends over there, decent people, and I feel sorry for everybody who works there.
And there was this clip that you aired last night with Harvey Levin, I think, from TMZ, and it was shocking, I thought. It was Matt Lauer, apparently some broadcast, to the local affiliate didn't get interrupted the way it normally would, and so the feed continued. And here was Matt Lauer transforming from America's Dad.
That's right.
Into commenting on someone's sweater, and I think he said something like, I like the way you bend over, you should keep doing that. And his face looked different, and it was shocking.
Yeah, I mean, it was shocking. It's always jarring to see people in their natural habitat when you're used to seeing them on television, though I do think over time, TV reveals the truth. I mean, if you sit in front of a camera every day for years, viewers kind of know who you are, actually. Yeah. On some level, they do.
This brings up a question I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Is the Sean Hannity we see on TV, is that really Sean Hannity? Are you the person we see on TV?
Well, I'm totally the person you see on TV. Yeah. I don't have the disk space for that level of artifice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not smart enough to be that false. And also, it's too hard.
I mean, every view you hold, you also feel comfortable expressing on TV?
No.
Okay.
Every view I hold, no, of course not. I've got all kinds of views I cloak from public view.
Where is the filter?
Yeah, I believe in no, of course I don't.
Yeah.
Everything I say on television I sincerely believe, and if I can just put in a plug for my employer, one great thing about Fox, and this is totally sincere, is no one's ever told me what to say or what to think, ever. And there are not even any guidelines. So I feel completely free to say what I think. But often when, people are yelling at me on train platforms or giving me the finger as I walk to lunch or whatever, on those occasions when I can talk to them, you're awful on TV, you probably wouldn't like me in person either, because that's like kind of who I am.
Well, this seems to be a superpower of yours, is you do not care what people think about you necessarily.
Well, I care a lot what people I love think about me.
Okay.
I mean, I have 4 children. I've been married for 26 years. I live next door to my college roommate. I have lunch with my dad every week. I go to the gym with my brother every day. I mean, I have a small group of people whose opinions are all important to me, but I don't care what people I don't know think. Why would you, and this is a lecture I always give to my producers, or when I supervised 90 reporters, all had Twitter accounts, I was always telling them, don't give emotional control to strangers. Why would you? It's like giving a toddler a handgun. He's going to misuse it. Why would you do that?
Right.
And one of the pitfalls, maybe the main pitfall of TV and of any kind of public job, is that you can wind up really caring what people you don't know think about you. And you're, in effect, again, empowering strangers to control your life. And why would you? That's insane. Why would you ever do that?
Right.
So I'm naturally suited for this job because it's never occurred to me to sort of care what people who hate me think. I mean, I care about the ratings, and of course, I'm not impervious to it, but I'm not on social media. I'm not like trolling for affirmation from strangers. Why would you do that? And a lot of people do that who don't even work in this weird business.
So what is the thing that, if you don't care what people think, which it seems...
I very much care, just to be clear.
Oh,
not
okay.
a sociopath. Like,
right.
If my wife says he shouldn't do that, I'm really wounded by it, and I follow those instructions immediately.
Just draw...
No, I'm serious, I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I get it. The line, though, there is a line. We covered this already, I don't want to be a dead horse, but there is a line where it's like, the Fox News audience might not take what I have to say about such and such topic. What is that line? I mean, why does...
Well, I mean, here's the way I think of it. I mean, you're never going to believe me, so it's probably pointless even to articulate it, but I really try not to think too much about how I'm viewed or what I say is going to be viewed, because it creates a kind of self-consciousness that drives you crazy. It's like looking in the mirror a lot or checking Twitter a lot. It pulls you out of yourself too much in a bad way, and you start seeing yourself through other people's eyes, and it diminishes you and makes you gun-shy and jumpy and insecure, and all the things you don't want to be if your goal is to put on a good show and be happy and tell the truth, and you know what I mean? So I actually don't think a lot about that. But if you step back, I do think of my role as different from someone hosting a show on another channel. I mean, I feel like almost all the other news outlets that I see, and I've worked at most of them, are kind of in sync on what stories are important and how they ought to approach the stories. And that's fine, I'm not mad about it, but I think there ought to be a role for someone who's looking at stories that aren't covered by everybody else and is looking at things a little bit differently. I kind of believe in diversity that way.
There's a Twitter meme that I've seen a few times that kind of illustrates this, and which is so there'll be some breaking news in the Russia investigation, and someone will take a screen grab of what CNN's got on, and they're talking about the Russia investigation. And then they'll do the same thing, MSNBC will have it, and then there's you,
yeah.
The
badge of honor.
Yeah. Talking about fraud.
But the assumption is that, like,
talking about something else.
Some Twitter user believes he should be my assignment editor, which I find hilarious. It's like, really? Okay, apply for a job. Maybe I'll hire you. You know what I mean? Like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, the reason that Fox hired me was in part to sort of take an hour. I'm not in charge of Fox. I have no influence over the rest of the channel. I just have responsibility for an hour. And put on what you think is important, inherently important, or that you think is important anyway, and say what you think about it, and that's what I do. So it's totally disconnected from what Stephanie Ruhl's doing on MSNBC or Anderson Cooper. I'm not against them, but those aren't relevant markers to me at all. And in fact, I think, I said I wouldn't be critical, but I will say this. I do think that there is a kind of childish groupthink in the media a lot, where people are checking other outlets to ratify their own decisions, and I kind of get that. There is a wisdom in the judgment of a crowd. However, at some point you have to say, well, no, this is important for these reasons. So tell me why this is important. As to the Russia thing, I've done a lot of Russia segments, probably too many. But I think we inflate its importance. And I also, by the way, think we pay way too much attention to Trump. I've always thought that. Trump is moderately interesting. He's the president of the United States. He's really powerful. Well, it's a legitimate topic of discussion. But if you're programming your entire schedule around one guy and his tweets, it's possible you might be missing other stories.
Okay, I have one for you, though.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton. Like, no other networks cover Hillary nearly so much as Fox News, it seems to me.
If you want Hillary news, you know where to go.
Why are we still talking about her?
I don't know. I can only speak for my show. We're not talking about her that much.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah, you're not the one with the flow charts.
I don't know. I mean, I think my real opinion is I think there's something really interesting going on the Democratic side. I live in D.C., which is, I think it was 93 or 4%. It's the most Democratic city in the country, okay? So I'm surrounded by Democrats. And some of them are smart, and a lot of them are my friends. And I know because of that there's this war may be too strong, but only mildly too strong, this conflict going on in the Democratic Party over what it is. Whose party is it? Is it the party of Bernie Sanders, or is it the party of the Clintons, or is it something very different? Is it an identity politics party run by somebody else? And I think I think Democrats are likely to do well in the next cycle, certainly the next couple cycles. They're out of power. They won't always be out of power. And so I think it's important to ask questions like, what is the Democratic Party and what does it stand for? I grew up I'm 48, in a world where the Democratic Party was the party of, the faculty lounge, but it was also the party of wage earners. It was a working class party. It was Roosevelt's party. And it's not anymore. And the exit polling confirms that. It's the party of the affluent, well-educated, and of the poor. And so what does that mean exactly for policy? So I think it's an interesting conversation. So watching the rejection of the Clintons is a fascinating story. I mean, I covered the 1992 presidential race. And so I always go back and I think, well, would Bill Clinton be a viable candidate as a Democrat now? And of course not. He'd be jeered. He'd be pulled off stage as like a racist or something. I mean, like literally. And I think that's interesting on its face, but I also think there's sort of deeper lessons that come out of that. So,
but is that what you're talking about when we talk?
Yeah, we just did a whole segment on this last week. Whose party is it?
Yeah.
And I even said,
do you care about Uranium One and all that? Is that a
Uranium One's a real story.
Okay. Please explain to me, because it seems to me, and I do not want to debate you. That is.
I'm not going to debate. I'm not a debater. I'm a question asker.
Okay, but it seems to me that many people had to approve this deal. Many people did, and an entity bought, and there was no connection in terms of actual equity holdings between the donor to the Global Clinton Foundation and the guy who actually sold the company to the Russians. Well, he sold it many years before, and then later.
Oh, so he wasn't a stakeholder in the company?
Well, maybe he was or not. But
I don't know. You're the one who's got the facts.
No, that's what I'd heard at least.
No,
again.
Oh, you heard it. Where?
On the internet.
Oh, on the internet. Okay.
Maybe.
So as an expert on Uranium One, perhaps you can set me straight.
I told you, not debating.
I'm not debating.
This is not debating. I'm just asking you questions. I'm just asking you questions.
You still think Uranium One's a story? I don't know.
No, but how
Nicholas, tell me.
It doesn't seem like one to me.
Oh, it doesn't? No. Based on what you read on the internet?
No, because they couldn't even move the... No, again, they couldn't even...
hilarious.
They couldn't even move... Hold on, one point. They couldn't even move the uranium out of the country.
Oh, they didn't? They moved no uranium out of the country?
You could... Now,
they didn't have
look
an export
at that. That was
license.
good. See, that's how you get ratings. It's like...
No. That's how you ask honest questions.
Well, no,
and,
it's excellent.
And you get to the core matter,
now you tell me. Did they
does
move,
the person casting aspersions on your views have any idea what he's talking about?
I wish I knew more.
And I guess I would put you in the no category because, actually, look, I'm not saying that I try not to overstate.
No, it's fair. You're being accurate.
If you can find a place where I grossly overstated something or was inaccurate.
Yeah. Okay, tell me why Uranium One is a big story. Let's go back to that.
I don't know it's the biggest story, but
I didn't say the biggest.
Look, here's the context. First of all, uranium was shipped out of the country, despite the fact the company did not have an export license to do so. That's the New York Times reporting on the subject, just confirmed again last week. So I don't know if that's like a world-ending problem, but if you believe, as many people seem to, that Russia is our primary adversary on the world stage, the idea that a Russian company got control of some portion of our uranium.
Well, this is interesting. A big talking point is that uranium was not allowed out of the country. You're saying now there's been
well, not only am I saying
confirmed
now,
reporting
it's
that-
been reported multiple times in the paper that presumably you read, but in this case didn't.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
So look, I'm just saying, here's what bothers me is the repetition of talking points by people posing
No, I tried to get
as
into this one. I was
journalists.
like, why is everyone-
Well, you know, I can't believe it's a conspiracy theory. Okay, maybe it is.
All right.
But like, tell me how.
Okay, no.
We'll talk later.
Good. I clearly need to learn more. Okay, here's a question. I was watching your program last night. After reading a lot about you,
Yeah.
and it's you're not anti-authority maybe, but you don't like it when people tell you what to do. It seems like, right?
I don't think the people in charge have done a good job.
Okay. No, but I want to characterize you. Tell me if it's an unfair characterization. Libertarian bent, somewhat.
I guess. I mean,
Okay,
I was a libertarian for a
anti-authority.
long time. Now I can't believe I held those views. I'm
Watching your
embarrassed.
show, here's the question. Watching your show, the motif is the American flag everywhere. You know.
Okay.
It really is.
I can't see behind me. So.
Okay, fine. But well, watch your program. It's there. That was rude. Sorry.
I've actually never watched my program, to be told.
Well, there's American flags everywhere.
Okay.
And then you've got
That's pretty offensive.
No, but
Some kind of freaking nationalist.
No, but is that it's sort of like literally flag waving? Is that literally the role? And then also you've got the president. Meanwhile, just for context, he loves you guys. He tweets at you directly. He watches your show.
I'm not on Twitter, so I wouldn't know.
But I mean, there was this. I don't want to read a long quote, but it's, at Fox News, this is the president of the United States, is much more important in the United States than CNN. But outside the U.S., CNN International is still a major source of fake news, and the representative, blah, 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 and so on and so on. He loves you guys. And
Can I just pause and note parenthetically
sometimes
that
it feels like you're watching.
People don't give Trump the credit he deserves for being hilarious.
Oh,
They don't. I'm sorry. I mean, like, I can say that I'm sure, stares of hate coming my way.
Are you uncomfortable?
But let me just.
Are you uncomfortable being like the beloved outlet of the most powerful person in the world who is also a billionaire?
You can go back. I've been in this 26 years. And if you can find an example of me sniffing the throne of a politician, I will lie prostrate in a.
No, I can't. So that's why I'm asking if you're uncomfortable with the fact that the appearance of
I get
Fox
this all the
News-
time. I was talking to some moron the other day from the Washington Post who said, are you alt-right? I said, well, geez, I don't know. I don't think so. It sounds bad. What is alt-right? Well, I don't know it's bad. Okay, well, then I'm not, because I'm not bad. And he said, well, I called David Duke the other day and asked him what he thought of your show. And I thought, you called David Duke? So that's like puts you one up on me in the alt-right category, right? Okay, I've never called David Duke. And he likes your show. What do you say to that? Well, I don't know. I'm against McCarthyism for one thing. You're like, what? I don't know.
So
do you know what I mean? I guess I would say this. I'm not comparing Trump to Duke, by the way, just to be clear. But I am saying that it's actually less complicated than perhaps you imagine. We just sit down every morning, my boxer shorts in my kitchen, on email, trying to figure out what is an interesting hour we can put together. And people react to it in various ways. And like, I don't know, am I responsible for that? I can tell you this, I've never coordinated anything with any politician ever. I don't like politicians in general. I am friends with no politician, have never been, never would be.
So if there is an idea out there that Fox News or your program is carrying water for the administration, that would really irk you if that was, well, maybe not. You don't care what people are.
We get all kinds of criticism. In case you can't tell, I don't read any of it. Yeah. But here's what I know. Fox has been the freest environment I've ever worked in. And I'm not just saying this in order to suck up to my corporate masters. I mean it. There's no interference at all, ever, not one time in the year and 3 months or weeks I've done this. And I love that, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm not responsible for, I don't have any role in it. I have an hour. I can speak for my hour. I love everyone I work with at Fox. Everyone's honest in my experience of them. So that's what I would say. Trump, I disapprove of Trump tweeting at all, okay? Just because I disapprove of the medium. I think it diminishes all who participate in it.
We're sadly running out of time, and I want to know.
Got a lot more opinions, Nicholas. Hit me, man.
I'm just asking questions here.
Good.
Right? That's the line. Who'd you vote for? And which party are you registered to?
I don't want to give the party thing because it's actually misleading. I never vote, so that's the truth.
Okay.
I didn't vote this time. I never do vote. Then you don't have a right to give your opinion. Yeah, I do. And in fact, I do. And I'm registered actually with a party that I sincerely despise because I think it's really a force for bad in this country. And it's the Democratic Party. But I'm registered because I live in the district. It's a one-party state. And the one election I always vote in is the mayor's race because it matters. And I own property there. I raised 4 children there. I live in the city. And I think it's worth voting in that election. So I always do. I always vote for the more corrupt candidate over the idealist. Always. The person who will just like be happy taking payoffs from developers and leave me alone. It's always the case. This is like a meaningful decision in my life, and it's every 4 years. There's always some guy who's like, I'm going to make your life better. I vote against that person every single time. You know what I mean? And it's usually honestly, it's usually, whatever. It's some progressive candidate who's got big plans for me. And so I just vote for the status quo, corrupt, criminal operation that runs the city, and I'm really happy with that.
Well, Tucker, that's great. I have 100 more questions, but we're out of time.
And I've got 100 more answers.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate
man.
it.
Please welcome Tony Reed with Steve Kovac.
All right, I think we're going to tone it down a bit after that one.
Okay.
Not going to ask Alexa who she voted for or anything like that. So we have Tony Reed here. She is in charge of all the Alexa and Echo ecosystem of devices. And I want to do this real quick. Raise your hand if you have something with Alexa in it, an Echo, something. That's about half, 60%. So that's. You have Tony to thank for that. I want to talk a little bit about your background first before we dive into other stuff. You come from an anthropology background. You have an anthropology degree, and you've been at Amazon for how many years?
Almost 20.
Almost 20, and now you're, with this interesting background, you're now running the dominant AI voice control platform. Talk a little bit about how those two, your background meshes with what you're doing now.
Yeah, I sort of called my career working on Alexa and AI a little bit accidental. I graduated with a degree in anthropology with plans to get my PhD, and I ended up working in technology at Microsoft and then moved over to Amazon in 1998.
Back when it was mostly a bookstore.
It was still a bookstore
Yeah, right.
at the time.
Right.
We hadn't launched music yet, and so still a very small company. It was post the company being public, but it was still very small. And I'll say a lot of the kind of attributes and the way Amazon operated then is very similar to how we operate now. And I will say that this degree in anthropology has actually given me, it aligns well with a lot of the values at Amazon. So we're very customer obsessed. And you'll hear that a lot from employees and the press, but it is something we kind of live day in and day out.
And this is Jeff Bezos' thing.
It is his thing, yeah. And it's something that really level sets and grounds people into the company around really working on the behalf of our customers. And so we do that very much with Alexa. We take, our goal there is around improving the lives of customers, adding more convenience in their lives. And so if you take that and you think about anthropology around this idea of what are customer needs, what are the differences in customers, and sort of being able to look out on the horizon and understand these differences, I think it's actually been an attribute for having this degree and this background versus a technology degree.
Right, and those needs are, so what are those needs? What are you finding people, you kind of put this thing out there, no one, especially in my industry, we didn't, like, what is this thing? What? And then it just took off like a rocket ship. What have you guys learned? What are the needs that people are getting? I know music is huge, but what else?
Yeah, music is a really large use case for us. People love the convenience of being able to play music through multiple providers via their voice. But we found other pieces that were really popular, smart home. When we first launched, we knew we wanted to launch smart home capabilities, but we launched with it about 4 months later. And customers, we thought, well, this is just an early adopter thing, right? And we found that, yes, that was true, but it was really it became much more mainstream with Alexa. And I think that's because voice made smart home technology even simpler. It's now voice enabled. You can say, turn on my lights, turn off my lights, and you don't have to go into an app. And that surprised us, and it actually surprised us at the usage of smart home and then the number of people buying into smart home devices as well. And then, a third piece that we've been surprised by is the personality. People love Alexa's personality, and they love to tell her, to hear jokes. They say, "I love you, will you marry me?"
And what does Alexa say when I say, "Will you marry me"?
She has a few different responses. One of them, I think, is "Thank you, I'm flattered." But, and customers ask her opinion about things. And so it was surprising to us that there was really this companionship, kind of conversational nature that was going on from very early days. And then now it makes sense because people have really taken Alexa and it's a part of the family. It's really become something more, it's human-like, and it kind of fits into the home.
It really is. I could tell you my 18-month-old nephew, he talks to our Echo, and he just knows the music comes from that, and it's really adorable that he's going to grow up with that and just know that's happening.
I mean, we actually say that. It's interesting to think about. We're in a generation where children today will probably not know a home in which they can't speak to.
Right.
And so that's very new.
Right, and it's very natural. We saw that with cell phones and kids learning that. Now it's this whole idea. So, smart home, music. Today you had an announcement. You're going into the office. What does that mean?
Yeah, so today, I think maybe right as we speak, at reInvent, we've announced Alexa for Business. And so this is an opportunity for companies of all sizes to take the Alexa experience and integrate it into their workplace. And we found that customers have loved the experience at home, and this is a way to extend that into their workplace. So we're really excited about this announcement.
What does that look like? Does that, are people can play Pandora in their office, or what's the practical use?
Yeah, you could imagine kind of two scenarios. The office workplace scenarios that we're launching with are communications features, so you can start a meeting. I've been testing this, and it's super delightful. So when you go in to start a meeting, now it's your conferencing system, and you can we're working with Polycom and Chime, our AWS service as well. And so when I start a meeting, I just say, "Alexa, start the meeting." You can end it, "Alexa, end the meeting." You can reorder supplies. We've had partners who can build on the Alexa Skills Kit, and they can build their own custom private skills. And so
just internally in the
company. So for example, Capital One has taken and built their own skill to get updates on high severity events. And so if they have a sub 1 or sub 2 going, they can say, "Alexa, what's the update on this?" And so it's really it's building the Alexa for Business kind of set of APIs, and then allowing developers, in this case, some companies, to build on top of them.
Great. And then, so speaking of skills, that's another, I think, strength of this platform is, how many skills are there now? Third-party skills, approximately?
Over 25,000.
Over 25,000. So that's huge. And we see a broad range, obviously, music and smart home stuff. What have you learned from all these third-party skills? Like, what works the best on this platform?
We're still learning. And I will say that there's a lot of breadth. So you will obviously have your top skills where people love them. So games, trivia games, Jeopardy. Jeopardy is one of our most popular skills. Okay. And so people love that. It's kind of family-oriented. Those are really fun. Then you have your brands, such as Starbucks, Uber, Domino's Pizza. Those are delightful skills. You can order Starbucks, pick it up on your way out, order an Uber. And then you have what I'll call this set of skills that you kind of have to have for everyone. And so it's the tail of skills. And we find a lot of people, smart home is one, news providers are another, but we find hobbyists and
so like niche stuff.
Niche stuff, and you've got companies such as financial services, Capital One, what is my bank account status, et cetera. So the breadth is significant for the usage.
So to me, Alexa seems kind of nebulous. It's kind of, you have your own devices. But there's also this broader ecosystem now. We're starting to see it in third-party devices, even devices that kind of mimic what you already have with the Echo. There's the Sonos One, for example. How do you guys think about that? People kind of glomming onto the platform and just creating these similar devices to you. Are you okay with that, or would you see a future where you guys kind of put a tighter reins around it?
No, we're thrilled with it.
And why?
Our vision is for Alexa to be everywhere customers want her to be. And so that will end up in places that we will never build those devices. We wouldn't be able to keep up. And so for us, it's important that the Alexa voice service itself has that distribution. And we think that these providers can build very delightful experiences. And it's sort of whether it's a different use case, a completely different segment, they will just help build out the experience for Alexa. They also can build custom skills to further. So like for automotive, as an example, I mean, there's a good example. We're not in the automotive.
Right. There's no Amazon car yet, right? Okay.
And so, but then we'll start to build new navigation domains, et cetera, for those use cases. And so not only is the Alexa voice service extended and available to more customers through more devices, but the developers themselves are building more skills, and that makes Alexa even smarter and even more useful for all customers.
Do you think that puts you guys at a greater advantage than, say, I know Apple delayed their version of their follow-up to you, their HomePod, but it seems they're much more restricted. What do you think of their position versus your take on just like, let's put it in everything?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to sort of their decision-making criteria and why they choose to be more closed. I will say that we believe having this be open and having APIs available for developers will actually just better serve customers globally.
So this year, you guys had tons of announcements, but I think a month or two ago, you had your big debut of, is there tons of devices? I think there was a doorbell thing, a camera, a answering or a phone, something you connect to your landline.
Echo Connect.
It seems like everything you can put Alexa in, you guys are doing. Is there anything that you won't put Alexa inside of?
That's a good question. Sure.
Yeah. No Alexa toilet or something, but
not yet.
Yeah.
For us, there's definitely a prioritization of sort of where we look to spend our time and effort, and some of those, we look at areas where we think we can improve the experience, create convenience, simplify the lives of customers. We'll look at the size of that usage or segment size. And so that's really what goes into our prioritization. But sure, there are also things that I'd love to do that's just, not quite above the line yet for us. So.
And so these slew of products, I think the last one, what's it called, the Spot, is coming out in a couple weeks. And I think that's it for the end of the year. You have so many. Is the idea like, let's get all these out there and see what works, and like maybe some of these drop off a year from now? Or are you guys confident that this suite of products you've made will actually, they will all take off?
I'm confident they're all going to do really well. And so that doesn't mean that we know for sure that every product we build will be a 4-star product and be successful. For the Echo device line, that's actually, we've seen success repeatedly with the products that we've launched. I think Echo Spot is...
and Spot, for people who don't know, what is that?
It's I'll start with the Echo Show, is a larger device with a screen that we launched this summer. Echo Spot is the second device with a screen that's a circular 2.5-inch diameter screen. And I'm very excited about this product because it's this great compact form factor that you can sprinkle throughout your home. I have one at my at work on my desk, and it's super delightful. I have one in my bedroom, and so the screen is actually a way to supplement and kind of augment the experience from a voice perspective, and so we can add supplementary information on the screen, and so I think customers are really going to enjoy Echo Spot.
So this year we saw an expansion. We are familiar with the Echo speakers, no screen, no cameras. Now we're getting into that. There's even a version of Amazon camera that checks your fashion choices in your bedroom. So we have Amazon microphones, Amazon cameras, Amazon screens. You can tell where I'm going with this. Why should we feel safe having these devices in our house?
I can talk about it in two ways. One, we start very much from the customer and work backwards, and we keep privacy in mind from the beginning of the build when we think about this. And Echo is a great example of that, where we built in a lot of customer controls and transparency. So you can mute the device When you speak to Echo, it has a blue LED. It shows you that it's streaming audio to the cloud. You can actually turn on an audible noise, an earcon, a chime that allows you to hear when it's streaming. When you mute the device, it's disconnected electronically, so there's no software that can override that. We give customers control in the app where you can go through and look at your voice history. You can see what has been said to Alexa.
Which is fun, by the way, if you go in and see what your family members are saying to Alexa.
Very fun. I do it when I'm traveling.
Yeah,
I go see
me
what's
too.
going on at home. You can delete those recordings. You can delete all of the recordings. And so for us, it's very important to give customers transparency and control and help them understand why we're collecting this information and you know, why you have a camera. And it will always have a customer benefit.
Mm-hmm. So talk about so that's the voice thing aspect of it. What about the camera aspect of it?
Similar.
Same thing? Yeah.
Similar in the case of the camera, it is there today to detect presence. And so when you walk into a room, it can detect that you're there and the screen will come on. Mm-hmm. When you're not there, the screen goes off. And it's also there for communication features. So we have video calling.
Right, video chatting.
And video chatting. And so it has a use case. You can also disable that with a click of a button as well.
Okay. So you've built this massive platform already, and it's been how many years since the first Echo? Three-ish? Yep. And we had Scott Galloway here from NYU talking about, I think by his estimate, you have about 70% of this market, which it's relatively a small market, but you've leapt ahead of Google, you're ahead of Google, you're ahead of Apple. How do you think about the responsibilities that go with that platform? We've seen Google struggle with this with their search platform, favoring Google services over other stuff. How do you make sure when someone is, let's say, shopping through the app or through Alexa, that they're not only getting like Amazon branded products? If I say I want batteries, I'm getting maybe Duracell instead of the Amazon version of batteries. How do you guys play around with that and the responsibility that comes with this growing platform?
Yeah, in the case of the shopping example, we will return something similar to what you would get on Amazon search results, and that will be bestseller. So whether it's an Amazon Basics brand, mm-hmm. Which in the case of batteries I think is a great product, great reviews, and very low prices, but it can also be any other brand. It also is weighed with your past purchase history, and so something that you've purchased before. And you know, the reason why this is actually really hard with voice and shopping is that when you're trying to order or shop via voice, you don't necessarily, customers don't want to hear a long list of products that come back. You really want to give them one choice, maybe two. You want to get it right that first time. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it's very much based on sort of Amazon's customer first approach.
If I am building a shopping app, am I allowed to have a shopping skill as a third party outside of Amazon on Alexa?
Meaning if you're maybe a retailer.
If I'm, let's say, Target or Walmart.
Yeah, so we have Best Buy.
Yeah, Best Buy's on there?
Yeah, Best Buy has a skill that they've developed.
That's totally cool with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I mean, look at the music experience, and so Amazon has it. Yeah, so Amazon has Prime Music and Amazon Music Unlimited, but we also have Pandora, Spotify, and others. And so for us, it's important to bring customers choice and selection with the services that we offer.
So we have a lot of marketers in the audience. Can you talk a little bit about how people might want to market or make money through the Alexa platform, whether it's through ad sales or maybe native advertising in a news segment or something like that? Is that allowed on the platform, and what are you seeing there?
So advertising today, what you have today is in content that's streamed on the device, so music, video, news providers. Their advertising is included, which is consistent with what you would experience when you're listening to that content on a mobile device or somewhere else. Beyond that, from a pure advertising perspective, it's something that we want to think really hard about because it can be distracting from a customer experience perspective, and it's something that we want to be very thoughtful about creating a new experience from an advertising perspective and in this case in a primarily voice-based experience. But then we also have ways for developers and companies to make money through the, we have a paid subscription and upsell program. So we just launched about a month ago with Jeopardy the ability to upsell to Double Jeopardy. So it's a content pack, and you can add it for 99 cents or free with Prime. And so we're starting to...
Did you take a cut of that, or?
I actually don't know. And so for us, it's about driving monetization that drives a direct customer benefit as well. And that will also teach us how customers will use this and what will be acceptable and what is a good user experience. And we have other ways that developers can make money as well, where we pay them from a paid engagement perspective if they have a skill that drives high engagement. We have AWS credits, et cetera. And so we've got a bunch of pieces that we're experimenting with and that we've been rolling out.
So last thing, Alexa's going global. I think how many countries now? Just got Australia?
Yeah, so we just announced Australia last night. We're in India, Japan, Canada, which is releasing soon, UK, Germany, US.
And how does that work? How does, besides the language, obviously, how is the Alexa experience different in those countries versus what we're seeing right now in the US?
Yeah, so it's fully localized. So we take the Alexa core experience and personality, and a lot of those things stay true. And we localize. And so we have a local voice that has a local accent. We localize skills. We have a robust set of data and knowledge that we have to start understanding.
Does personality go into that too? You touched on that, yeah.
It does. And so, her personality doesn't radically change. It's really the same everywhere. But, there's a localized piece to it. So if you ask her favorite, an opinion or her favorites, it will change, in different countries. And so we do spend a lot of time on fine-tuning what that localized experience would be. Part of it is we have to understand the language, and then we have to be able to respond back in that language with the proper accents. And so each of these are fully localized.
So when is Alexa fully global? How long?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough question.
Years, months?
Years. I mean, this is something we'd love to go faster, but we want to do it the right way. We want customers in each of these countries to love the experience. And so for us, it's you have to balance the speed at which you can do that with really having a delightful experience.
Great. That's all we have time for, but I do have a programming note for everyone before we break for lunch. Lunch will be in the Getty Lounge and the Hudson Crossing. And while you guys are out there, stop by and talk to those Pepper robots, those little white, cute robots out there. They're not just for decoration. You can actually interact with them and talk to them and take a selfie with them. We also have some cool VR demos, so when you're done with lunch, check those out as well. We'll be back right here at 1:30 for a conversation with Brian Cornell, the board chairman and CEO of Target, and Jeff Schumacher, founder and CEO of BCG Digital Ventures, with Fast Company editor and managing director Robert Safian. Following that, we'll be breaking out like we did yesterday into pillar programming, so check back of your name badge, and you should have the stickers designated where you're supposed to go for that. Marketing pillar is going to be right here in the Columbus room, and the next big thing pillar is going to be sponsored by BCG Digital Ventures in the tower east-west across the hall. And go eat. We'll see you back at 1:30. Thanks, guys.